Okay. Oh, I think. Great. I am struggling. It is. Yeah, I know. That's about right. Before that. Exactly. It does help. Yes. Put something together. Yeah, do you want to? I think we can do those. Before. Yeah. Hopefully. Might just palm it too. I thought the English option. Yeah. It's just. South. Yeah. I'm sure that's really a lot too. Yeah. It's really I find it interesting. It's a question that I have for yeah. Good morning. Jennifer, yeah. I'm sure you did doing a great job. Great job. Yeah. What about me? I know. I know.
as well. Whether you were, a part of this group, elected official, just an interested party, or for me, I even grabbed stuff from a homeowner perspective about, some of the nurseries that were there for water smart plants and things like that out of my house. There was information for everybody. And so I thought that was really good, variety of the people who were there represented by the different booths.
Yeah, well, that's another good part of that forum is all the getting to talk with all of the different folks, exhibitors around.
And the winner, Randy Gustafson, is just a pillar in the region and just a super great guy. And it's great to see the community honor him in that way.
Yeah.
He's so humble and would never accept something like that without being drugged there. That was fun.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, going back to our session last month, another thing that people commented on was Greg Peterson's presentation. It was kind of like just a little bit of contention, like, is he biased towards ag in a way that's a little, let's say not genuine, like it's very genuine, but what is the full, kind of picture on agriculture, and is he presenting it? Is it his job to present it? I don't know. He's obviously a promoter of agriculture and water for agriculture. And I know some other people in our group really enjoyed that presentation, and that perspective is extremely important to get out there, especially the impacts of buying dry. A lot of people aren't familiar with that. And what happens when we take water and take it out of ag and give it to municipalities. There is kind of this framing that people pointed out, is it really about the negative impacts of municipalities on agriculture? Is that what we should be focusing on? Are we focusing on the right things there? So does anyone want to comment on their perspectives or share out?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to be, Sunday morning, Jason sitting in the front row of church saying amen. And he it felt like a sermon almost. Of course, you guys know I come from ag, and I try not to be biased. My favorite quote is attributed to Aristotle. It's the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without necessarily accepting it, right? So I find information like that, even if you completely disagree with it, at least hopefully it puts another perspective in our minds. And that's what I enjoy about classes like this. I might not agree with everything, but it gives me a different perspective. And I think as leaders, we need that. But I could take his stance and what he said on ag and say, we have to acknowledge it, right? We have to. Just like from my current role as oil and gas director for Will County, I talk to people all the time about, you might not like it, but I don't have to look anywhere right here other than my blinders at my place setting right now to say the impacts of oil and gas are literally right here in front of me. If we want to discount that and just say it's not a part of our everyday lives, then please be the first to start doing away with all the products you particularly use, right? So you might not like it, but you have to also acknowledge that it's a necessary part of everybody's life. And like what Greg said, we all love to eat, right? It's part of what we are. I don't care if you're a vegan, a vegetarian, or a meat eater. We all eat. Agriculture touches every single one of us, whether it's the clothing we wear, or like Bob said, what we drink, Tatum, right? Barley. My in-laws used to grow barley, so I'm connected in it that way. My family still has our dairy farm. I'm connected to that side of it. It touches everything, and we can't ignore that. So also in the same voice, how do we do better? Right? We got to be looking at it from that perspective too. So I took a lot from that. I liked it because it kind of was one of those, don't discount the benefits we all see every day from agriculture. Mm-hmm. How do we work together?
Yeah, there are one, but I agree with Jason what you're saying. On the other hand, they're competing. Everybody is trying to get a finite resource. You can't go make water. You can go make whatever you want. There's only so much. And if you're gonna stand what you said, Jason's an ag man, he thinks that's it. I'm not an agricultural person. I love to eat, so don't get me wrong. Take a break, but that can bread, you know, sear on the other
Now you're talking.
side. But there's a competing resource we're fighting for. And people say, okay, let's let the market take it over. That interest is more expensive, it's gonna get too expensive for Jason to buy the water to whatever he wants to grow. On the other hand, because of the first right, you know, the first use, first and right. Is that right now, we have people here who need to have water for flushing toilets or drinking. And you're competing for the same resource. And maybe agriculture, you know, there are certain crops that should not be grown in certain areas. Arizona was a big cotton grower a few years ago. Hey, why in the world would anybody grow cotton there? It takes a lot of water. Imperial Valley grows a lot of produce. Maybe Mississippi would do, where they have a problem with too much water. Maybe that should be shifted. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. And we can sit here for hours going back and forth. And everybody has valid points. And I think in the end, it's just gonna be the biggest guy that's gonna win because he's gonna grab the little guy and pitch him.
Well, that's kind of what we.
And I don't even make fun of it, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's what I think we're trying to address
Mhm.
as a region now, is how do we avoid that outcome? Where the biggest, you know, the people with the most money, the biggest cities
Yeah.
have the most water, because they have the most
And
resources.
just because Elon Musk has enough money, like all the water is coming. I'm serious, just because somebody has a lot of money and can afford to have all they want, doesn't make it right. And maybe the state's gotta sit there, or somebody, some supreme power it is, and say, here's how we did, and get everybody together and say, it's gotta change, folks. We shouldn't have, why do we have, how many, like 40, I think they mentioned at the Blue Valley, Blue River, session, there are like 40 water authorities north of Denver. Wouldn't we better have one or two, you know, rather than all of us competing, let's work. And hey, I'm putting myself out of business.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying, it's just.
Yeah, so.
Some of the rationalization is gonna come in, I don't know when or where, or who's gonna be the giant who says, this is what we're gonna do.
Well, fortunately, I think that approach is, you know, it's still out there and people are definitely still doing it, but I think we're starting to realize as a state, you know, the Colorado Water Conservation Board,
Yeah.
the Colorado Water Plan, they're realizing that this approach of like, yeah, the biggest one wins.
Yeah.
That is not equitable. It's not gonna protect our agriculture. It's not gonna, you know, protect our low-income communities. How are we, or even just small communities, because they can't compete. So how can we work regionally and as a state to get some better outcomes, which I'm hoping that this class is. We're going down this, but it's not a short-term thing. I mean, this isn't gonna happen in like 2 years, so.
And I'm just want to point out, I think it's more than just we all like to eat too, because we can't get our food from other places, but it's, you know, securing our resources by having them grown locally, as well as, you know, making sure we have that sustainable source into the future if we have another pandemic or something like that. But also the communities that are out there. I mean, if they have no water, they're not going to be viable communities. So that's the other piece of it. Like you're saying, the smaller communities are the losers in all of this.
Yeah.
And the wildlife, as you pointed out, which I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't noticed that before. The birds using the fields and irrigated land, so.
Yeah, people don't realize, and I think, is that this one or next one with, Ducks Unlimited? That's the next.
Yep.
The huge impact of irrigated agriculture on like the ecological benefits of that. We'll have someone from Ducks Unlimited talk about that a little bit more next second. But yeah, if you take away all that water from the region, dry up all the wetlands, even just the fields themselves are habitat. And if you make that a dry dust bowl, not great habitat.
I was gonna go back to Dennis was saying about how we get all together on the same page and why should we should more or less water authorities. It's kind of a similar thing just in services in general. If you think about fire service and fire departments, same thing. They're all pods of their own service. And it costs taxpayers to do stuff in those smaller communities. Out in the rural area, if you don't have a hydrant close or a response close, your insurance goes up, this how you provide service. So you're seeing a lot more fire departments merge together. You know, North Metro, South Metro, Mountain View Fire is actually merged with Rocky. And then dealing with the things like fire, wildland fire and the urban interface. So I think it's possible and that service is steeped in tradition,
Well,
very much in tradition, fire services. So I think it's possible. People are doing it. So taking what they do could be another thing.
part of this whole thing comes from just the way Colorado developed, large areas. And I've noticed, I come from back east where you have county fire departments, county school system. Here in this county, how many school systems we have? My daughter worked in Hooter. We have Big Thompson, and it seems to have developed as settlers came west, they came up the river. Came up the river, and they developed their library systems, fire protection systems, school districts. They didn't care, the Big Thompson didn't care about who they were people, because it was miles apart. They cared about that channel that they came up. And I think that's one of the problems you have, like back east, I mean, we had county systems, so that we didn't have all these people competing, but then the county was smaller too. Well, the county is bigger than not many states.
Yeah.
And the sparshness, the emptiness.
Yeah.
So people tend to think close in.
I did want to mention to Adam, so I need to maybe reach out to him. He might want to stop using the power companies as his example though, because he keeps saying there's two or there's over 50 different power companies in the state of Colorado. So they're not the best either at consolidation, because when you do only have two large IOUs, Xcel Energy and Black Hills, but there are a lot of co-ops. I used to work for a co-op, and there's a lot of municipal owned utilities as well. So there's well over 50. So I was going to reach out to him and just say, hey, Adam, you might want to
Yeah.
change what you say.
We're talking about this region specifically, or?
Yeah, I can't even say this region.
Yeah.
And you have Fort Collins Utilities and United Power and Cooter Valley and Xcel Energy and Morgan County and all those REAs. Yeah,
Okay.
There's a lot. Yeah.
One other thing, and then we'll go ahead and get started, but one other thing that folks kind of brought up when we were talking about, you know, the housing affordability issues and cost of water, and people brought up like, why aren't there more subsidies or incentive programs to reduce the costs of development and make housing more affordable? And I wondered if anyone wanted to.
Who's gonna say? Who's gonna say?
There has to be an agreement
Private
that
industry, I mean,
The government tax it.
who's gonna pay? Taxpayers ultimately. It comes back, that's the consumer. I mean, who's gonna pay it?
Yeah.
Or who's subsidies?
I was struck at how cheap water was compared to all the other ingredients in building houses. Fortunately, water looked like a pretty good deal, actually, and the cost of water, I mean, delivery and storing water and water treatment, the public just is uneducated about the actual costs of that. So I think there's better ways to subsidize housing we want.
But even what you say about the cost of water is relative. Cities like, Loveland and Fort Collins, you got into the Big Thompson project early, pay a buck a unit for water. We're paying 15, and we started, they already bought there, and we're competing with this little bit. So therefore, we have to charge higher rates, tax, either the cost of water or for the tax, than say the others do. So this all tends to factor in.
I mean, water is more inexpensive than it should be. Like, I think potentially there might be consensus on that. But like, I mean, we work in a water heavy industry and it is by far our cheapest ingredient. And we're on cocoa, but like, by far our cheapest ingredient. So we work really hard to reduce our impact and to reuse when we can. And we have the most efficient ways of doing it for our size company that exists. But even then, like, there's very little incentive for industry specifically to not just wash things, you know, like, not physically wash, you know what I mean? Like, to just, let's dilute it before we have to dump this, or let's do it, like, that, there's no incentive for that. And even in the tiered system, like, we end up paying more for water at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year, just because we've used our chunk or whatever, but it's still our cheapest ingredient by far, and we don't think that's right, like, it's not right, especially here, but there's very little incentive from an industry perspective to be efficient and to reduce your use, and so, like, you know, we have recapturing tanks that are very expensive for us to put in, but it's worth it to do that because we think it's the right thing to do. But when you're selling beer at $7 or $8 a pint and you're trying to pay off stainless steel tanks that are $100,000, like, there's not a ton of incentive to do that when I could just put the hose and make the tree really pretty that people want to sit under, and then more people will cut, right? Like, there's this, or just turn the hose on and wash down this tank instead of pulling it from the tank that then we had to buy to recapture and all this stuff. So it's an interesting thing when we talk about housing affordability, because, like, my answer, which nobody in the business world wants me to say, is start charging people more for it, like, and not just individual consumers, but industry consumers, because that's true across the board in Northern Colorado, that water is the cheapest ingredient in anything that people are doing, even from an industry perspective, not ag, because that's a whole different thing, right? But it's really interesting what, like, the housing affordability question, when we say, like, how do we subsidize water? Like, charge the people who are using the most of it, because I think we can agree that water should be a human right, that people should have access to in an affordable way for their own personal use. But just, I believe that beer should exist, but just exist, like, no, obviously not. And so if a business or whatever business, right, like, it doesn't have to be a consumable product, but any product, like, should that business exist if they can't afford to exist in the area they exist in? I think we provide good jobs and we try to reduce our impact, but if you're not gonna charge even tiny companies like us, what you are in theory charging, like, people in their homes, like, there's kind of a disconnect there, because the two sides of me feel different ways about this, right? Because I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
If our water bill like tripled, we wouldn't be able to afford it, but should it? Like, it probably should morally. So it's an interesting thing. I think the housing affordability always makes me think of that. I'm like, okay, so what about, like, the people down the street from us who are watering their, like, 500 acres worth of lawn at 2 p.m. on, like, a July Wednesday? Like, how is that? And they can't do that because they can afford it, because they don't care if it costs a little bit more. So that's the part that always, like, hits me when we talk about housing, because that's important for us, and I think it's important for our region. But okay, so let's charge the people who are using it when they maybe shouldn't be. That's my soapbox.
Should have beer.
Hey, Tatum.
And now we have beer. Vote for Tatum.
Thanks for sharing, Tatum. Any other follow-up thoughts?
Good, well, I think in terms of, it's what you said, you know, you have people pay for it. I think I go back to when Fort Collins, not picked on them, but when they were talking, they had no water restrictions whatsoever.
Right.
Well, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, really, we've had it for a gazillion years, you know, and so part of me was very, because I'm thinking that's not fair. I mean, that's not fair, but that doesn't mean that people are being irresponsible though either. That's not, I can't take that assumption onto it, but I get back and forth on new development requiring not having big lawns, more xeriscaping, but I also don't want to impose on somebody to say you have to do this, you have to do that either. So I just don't know where where that lies, and where that balance is. And affordable housing to me is a unicorn. I hear about it all the time, doesn't exist, and you have to find different ways of trying to reach something that would be attainable to people. As a side note, just having been out in San Diego, I will note that our Airbnb and then a couple places we were at, different restaurants, had signs in the bathrooms, just on, we're in a severe water drought, please be mindful of what you're using. Our Airbnb on the watch there, it said, again, the severe water drought, please don't do a lot of laundry. And there was a bit of me that was like, whatever, you take all these, California, take all the water and use it. But it was nice to see, because I think we do say, okay, lower basin, you know, they use up all their portion. It was nice to see that there was some places that actually were making note of it. So again, Camp Broad stroke it off for that.
Yeah, and hopefully that presentation by Western Resource Advocates was helpful in thinking about some ways to address, especially the outdoor water use. And there was a bill, I think it was just passed.
Yeah.
That any new, like, it's not residential, it's all kind of commercial and industrial non-functional turf, so medians, like stuff that's just out there that no one's using. You gotta do, can't do like Kentucky bluegrass. And I think we will never see, maybe not say never, but I don't think it's likely we're gonna see laws coming into place that are gonna say, you have to rip up your lawn. That's just not gonna happen. It might say for new development, we have these restrictions in place. Aurora's already doing that. Some other municipalities are already doing that. And, encourage, have incentive programs that are like, if you want to rip up your lawn, here's some money to do that and some, templates to put in some nice drought resistant, et cetera, et cetera. So just put that out there. I don't think we're gonna get these mandates that are like, no lawns anywhere. It's kind of like, let's do what we can to make, lawns that no one is using. Let's get those out of there. Okay, so now we are going to switch over. We're going to be focusing on Water for the Environment today. We've got kind of the first round of presentations here. We're going to focus on impacts of climate change and kind of the extreme weather situation, extreme events. Then we'll talk about some of our Northern Colorado River programs and projects. We'll hear also about Colorado's in-stream flow program, and then we'll do our leadership challenge at the end. We are going to wrap up early today at 1, and I have to bolt immediately afterwards, but we're ending early. I got get on call, but we're ending a little early. Don't forget book report, people. Next month, you're on the hook for your book reports. Benton already sent out some information about that, so look at your emails if you're wondering what that's all about. All right, so let's just get started. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Kimberly Tekovec. Is that right? So she is a source water protection specialist with Northern Water. She has over 13 years of experience working with communities throughout Colorado to help develop and implement source water protection plans. She takes pride in her work to ensure the protection and provision of high quality water for over 1 million people and thousands of irrigated acres across Colorado's Northern Front Range. She coordinates with various departments internally, along with federal, state, and local agencies and stakeholder groups on the Front Range and West Slope. So let's welcome Kimberly.
Do you want me to stand?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay. I'll stand in the middle. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, and it's really good to be here. I'm really honored to present. I'm going to be talking today about impacts on a large-scale wildfire, primarily the East Troublesome wildfire, but Cameron Peak as well. These fires burned in 2020, impacted Northern Water's collection system. And I do want to say just right off the bat, Esther Vincent, our Environmental Services Division Director, was asked to present, and she was unfortunately not able to make it. So you have me instead, but this is her presentation. So I put my name up here so you know who I am, but I have Esther's contact information at the end of this presentation as well. So are most of you familiar with Northern Water? So I can kind of skip
a whole session on.
Oh, you did? Oh, you did? Okay, well, never mind. So this map, then I'll just kind of point out our district boundaries as a quick reminder. are along the Front Range, south to Broomfield and then north to Wellington. And then, all along the South Platte River to the Nebraska border. Our collection system is on the west slope, in Grand County in the upper Colorado River headwaters. And this, kind of schematic just overlays, obviously this isn't the actual burn areas in the Cameron Peak and East Troublesome, but just pointing out that, both fires in 2020 impacted our system. And I'm gonna focus really on East Troublesome because it impacted a large majority of our collection system. My role as a source water protection specialist is to, oversee our source water protection program. In addition to the CBT project, as you all, it sounds like you're familiar, we also have the NIST project and the Windy Gap Firming project. So for our source water program, we're working on delineating a source water protection area that encompasses over 2 million acres of watersheds. And these are all the watersheds that touch all of the different projects. But really our primary focus is the CBT watershed. So that's this one outlined in purple. This is a really super drafty map. It hasn't been vetted internally yet. So this is a sneak peek, but we're working on trying to prioritize with a number of different criteria, the sub watersheds within that source water protection area. So just kind of, again, super draft, but critical areas, high priority areas are really the collection system and then our distribution system along the CBT watersheds. Okay, so with all of that in mind and just framing the context of climate change and how it has compromised our forest health, I'm going to throw up a few slides. So over the last 30 years, yeah, it's coming up, so sorry about that. So over the past 30 years, our statewide average annual temperature has increased by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and climate change models are predicting further increases of up to 6 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050, somewhere between 2 and 6 degrees. So all of this in mind, you know, from a water perspective, point of view and environmental perspective, this leads to earlier snow melt, earlier spring water runoff, as we're seeing, hotter, drier summers, longer growing seasons, and with that comes longer fire seasons. And I'll talk about that in context with East Troublesome and Cameron Peak. We're seeing more frequent and severe heat waves and a net water budget deficit. Okay, so these graphs just kind of show the, this is the average annual temperature increasing over the last 40 years or so. Again, that's about 2% or 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And then this is the predicted average temperature increase.
Is that 2 degrees a year or is that 2 degrees?
2 degrees total. Yeah, a little less. Still concerned. Okay, so along with those warming trends, we're also, the Rocky Mountains have been kind of at the epicenter of this bark beetle epidemic. And I think, well, it's like a little slider. I don't know if I can get that slider to work. No, sorry. I'm gonna go back. Okay, well, this slider, it shows, the infestation of the bark beetles. This is our 3 lake system, Grand Lake up here, Shadow Mountain and Granby. So if the slider was working, you can kind of see that there's a lot of, bark beetle in our collections area. Oh, yeah.
Oh, here we
Yeah,
go.
there we go. There it is. Yeah.
So that's the aftermath.
Yeah, and so this is the, so this doesn't show like the severity of tree mortality, but it does show the extent of it.
Again, yeah.
Yeah. And then this map just shows this again. This is our source water protection area, about 2 million acres. And this shows the extent of that bark beetle, tree mortality, along different forest types within our source water protection area. Again, it doesn't show the severity of that mortality, but just how far reaching it is. So all of that, you know, warmer trends, longer growing seasons, longer fire seasons. We are seeing over the past 30 years or so, this increase in wildfires throughout the Western U.S. So we're seeing larger, more frequent, bigger acres, higher severity fires throughout western region, or throughout the western US. Zooming into Colorado, this is a graph of all of the largest fires in Colorado since 2002. Off to the right, 2020 was a really big fire year in the state of Colorado. Of the largest wildfires, 4 of the largest occurred in 2020. 2 of those being East Troublesome and Cameron Peak, which were the largest wildfires in the state. So again, I'm going to talk mostly about the East Troublesome fire. This is our collection area, kind of off to the left here. This is Grand Lake, Shadow Mountain, and Lake Granby. And these watersheds are really our collections area. So this is East Troublesome fire. It burned almost 200,000 acres in fall of 2020. It started October 13th. So kind of back to that longer season. We're not used to seeing fires start in the fall and at such high elevations. So started October 13th, 2020. On the night of October 22nd, it just blew up. It expanded by over 100,000 acres that night. Most of that occurring in the span of 90 minutes where it grew a 17-mile spread. This was primarily driven by hurricane force wind, and in the end, there were almost 600 structures burned, and it caused the evacuation of about 4,000 residents in Grand County. These are just pictures on the hill slopes, the watersheds above our 3-lake system, just showing the extent of the burn within our collections area. So when we're talking about wildfire, what does it mean for a water provider? So you know, when a fire burns and at such high severity, it really scorches not only the tree, but it scorches the land as well. So that really decreases any absorption into the land. It any water that rainfall, it starts coming down faster and flashier because it's not absorbing into the soil. There's no vegetation on the land slowing it down. So it comes down flashier. It takes a lot of that sedimentation and a lot of that dirt and ash that's on the hill slope down with it. So we see increased erosion in the streams. We see increased sediment and debris, both in the streams and in our reservoirs, and a lot of increased flooding as well. So this is a picture of Highway 125 in Grand County. This is in the Willow Creek watershed, which drains into Willow Creek Reservoir, which is one of Northern Water Storage reservoirs. Debris flows on the road. Highway 125 was shut down and continues to be shut down following a rain event several times. But the year after, pretty much every time it rained, 125 was closed. Cameron Peak fire, and I'm sure if you were all around following 2020, you're aware of the Black Hollow flood. Unfortunately, there was a loss of life, huge debris flows following that. And Laura, I know you're very familiar with Cameron Peak. Again, just some more pictures of flooding debris flows on roads showing road closures. This is East Troublesome fire in the Drowsy Water Creek watershed. This is Stillwater Creek Road crossing. This is a major US Forest Service road in Northern Waters Collections area. There was a big rain on snow event in May of, it was 2023, it was last year. Washed out this road completely. There was loss of recreation because people couldn't access that whole watershed. This is a huge recreational area. So we worked with the Forest Service to do some culvert upgrades and fixed this road crossing. This is also a video. There we go. So this is the North Inlet drains right into Grand Lake. This was a big Blackwater event the summer after the 2020 fires. You can see it draining in. That sediment, that ash washed up onto the beach of Grand Lake. And then again, just more pictures showing, massive debris flows throughout the watershed. So one of the things, I'm gonna go back to these pictures. So these are different points along the Willow Creek watershed. This is Willow Creek right here. It runs parallel to State Highway 125 and drains into Willow Creek Reservoir. So all of that sediment I guess not all of it, but a lot of that sediment eventually makes its way to Willow Creek Reservoir. This is kind of a graph showing the turbidity in the reservoir. So this is pre-fire, all of the like, pale yellows and yellow, or it's like, not super turbid, but these browns and reds, you can see, NTUs of 30 to 100, NTUs, post-fire.
Kimberly, I'm sorry, can you
Yeah.
explain what that is? I have no clue what turbidity is.
Something to you there.
Junk in the water.
Junk in the water.
Yeah.
There you go. That's my
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah. Ash. Yeah, ash, dirt, debris. So let's see, so that ash and all of that sediment also brings with it excess nutrients, which causes algae to grow in excess. So we have seen harmful algae blooms within Willow Creek Reservoir. This is some pictures of some of those algae blooms. We worked with the Forest Service manages recreation on Willow Creek Reservoir. So we worked with the Forest Service and we worked with Grant County, made the decision to, excuse me, close Willow Creek Reservoir for contract recreation for, I think at least for one summer, following the fire, because of this. And we're continuing to monitor this. We've increased monitoring throughout the watershed, for post-fire. And this is just a picture again, Willow Creek Reservoir showing a lot of the debris accumulation. This is at our outlet, of the reservoir.
The dam washed away there,
The dam didn't wash away, no.
the flag up.
No, this is just, debris from the fire, floating debris. Yeah, so we put this debris boom to block. This is flowing into our canal that leads into Granby Reservoir. And then this is at the inlet of, Willow Creek Reservoir. So this sandbar or dirt bar, sediment bar, whatever you want to call it. This was new accumulation following the fire. Since 2020, we've been doing annual bathymetric studies to see what sort of storage, we've lost. And we're kind of averaging right now, it looks to be about 1% loss of active storage annually. So we're continuing to do those studies every year to see. We had talked about dredging this, but ended up not going for that, but we'll see.
And why is that?
For,
Seems like naturally you dredge it out, you got all this junk in your dredging. Get it out of there.
why did we?
Yeah.
A lot of it had to do with like permitting access. A lot of this is Forest Service roads. So I think trying to get equipment down there, we would have had to build a new road. So there was a lot of issue, and then just the cost versus, cost effectiveness, so.
But long term, is that gonna have a long term impact, like?
We'll see.
More junk brings more junk, brings more.
Yeah,
It's gonna
yeah.
worse, isn't it?
Good. So what we're doing, and I'll talk about this a little bit, but we're trying to look kind of further up in the watershed to block some of that from coming down and making its way to the reservoir.
It used to be the Forest Service up there, make a fire and go in and replant. Put seedlings in. You don't see people doing that anymore.
Yeah, and I didn't, are you?
Yeah, we should talk about that.
Okay, yeah, so there is an effort right now, for all of the wildfires in the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest, on a reforestation effort. I don't have that, but it sounds like Laura's gonna talk about that. So, good question for later today. Okay, so, how much time do I have left? Okay. Okay, so I'll fly through this then. So, after the fire, Northern Water has been working, really closely with many stakeholders, with our federal partners, with local partners, with Grand County, on post-fire watershed protection. And we've been kind of thinking about post-fire, recovery in 3 phases. Our first phase happened immediately following the fire. We worked with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS, underneath their Emergency Watershed Protection Program. That program deals primarily with, protecting life and property really on private lands. So we did a lot of point treatments, specific treatments to protect private lands. And we also did aerial mulching to try and keep some of that erosion, and some of that sediment on the hill slope rather than coming down into our reservoir. So we did that, the first year and a half following the fire. And then we moved into phase two, where we did mulching really on federal lands. We worked through agreements with the US Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management to do, larger scale mulching. And right now we are in our phase three, which was kind of this long-term watershed recovery project, our, program. We have a participating agreement with the US Forest Service, and we're also working with other partners. Again, CWCB has been really helpful, the state agency, Colorado Water Conservation Board, on helping to provide funding, but the Forest Service, the county, local stakeholders, et cetera. It's, it's not just a one agency effort. So these are just some pictures of, before and after. This is, a bridge on Willow Creek, just above Willow Creek Reservoir, that would continue to get, and still continues to get, sediment piled up underneath it. So we've been working through the EWP program, on cleanup and with CDOT as well. So we've done some cleanup on that a few times. This is a picture of a private land. This is Hall Creek again, up, Willow Creek watershed that had like a huge washout. So we worked with those private landowners through the NRCS Emergency Watershed Protection Program to, get that restored. I think this is a video of some aerial mulching. So this is what it looks like. Literally helicopters bringing it in, get it up from a big pile and dumping it on the hill slope. We mulched between the EWP program and the Forest Service and BLM agreements about 13,000 acres of burn area, which sounds like a lot until you put it in context of an almost 200,000 acre fire. We went through kind of a prioritization strategy and identified areas that would be eligible for mulching. Again, 12.5 thousand acres, were mulched, but 97,000 still, did not get mulched. It's really expensive to do that work. So, helicopters, not the cheapest thing.
Were you able to measure the reduction in runoff from that? You can see that up Cooter Canyon for a year, but you just saw that video, it looked like it just dispersed. So what's the efficacy of that?
Yeah.
Can you measure it?
So there is CSU, has been doing, some studies right now with East Troublesome and Cameron Peak mulching some of the units, to determine that. And I think right now the results are inconclusive. Not to say that it didn't work. I think, when you're trying to compare a watershed that was unmulched with a watershed that was mulched, different rain events, different, it's a lot of it, with the study is also a little different. So unconclusive, but yeah.
Megan might be talking about that a little bit.
Okay,
in the
good.
Presentation.
Okay.
Possibly. I mean, I think there is some impact.
Yeah.
But a positive impact.
Yeah.
But we're still in the research phases.
Yeah.
I understand it's difficult to measure, right? There's so many variables,
Yeah.
slope angle, aspect, vegetation, soil content, but if there's anecdotal evidence, then I think that's all we really need.
Yeah, and there has been anecdotal evidence throughout the years. I know there was a study following the Hyde Park fire, and I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it was like, I don't remember what it was, but it was shown to be effective.
What is its purpose? Just to hold the soil down?
Yeah, a lot of it is, just ground cover to, keep the soil in place, stop some of that erosion. It also can help decrease some of the surface temperatures, bring some more nutrients back into the soil. Retain moisture, yeah. Okay, so again, moving forward into watershed, long-term watershed protection. Some of the things that we're looking at, and we are just completing a large watershed assessment over the entire burn area to identify high priority areas where we're seeing increased erosion, increased sediment coming down from the watershed and from the streams. So these aren't pictures of things that we're doing. These are types of activities that we might do. So we're looking at upgrading culverts where there's, increased chance of flooding so that we can let the water pass through the culvert instead of washing out the road. we're looking at low-tech process-based restoration techniques, which if you're unfamiliar with that term, it's really more like, trying to simulate nature, like simulated beaver structures, building fake beaver dams to raise the, floodplain so that when there is a large swath of water, it's not just rushing down the stream and causing further erosion, it's letting the water, go back up onto the floodplain and disperse. So we're looking at things like that, and we've identified a few areas that we'll be implementing this summer and working with Forest Service and other partners to identify additional areas in future years. We do have a post-fire watershed restoration lessons learned, report that we worked with East Troublesome and Cameron Peak fires on, that kind of outlines some of the, it's not issues, but some of the things that we ran into that we felt could be, better understood from both the legislative, policy, technical, and collaboration side. So we have that. Esther put on here this Watershed Protection Forest Recovery Act, and I wasn't quite sure. I think, I know there was a bill introduced that, would kind of replicate what the emergency watershed protection does on private lands for federal land. So I think that's what this one is. And I apologize, for not knowing that one. But the other one, I mentioned Colorado Water Conservation Board. They've been really instrumental, through this whole process, both in helping us secure match dollars, but also technical assistance as well. So just for East Troublesome Fire, we've spent almost $80 million in watershed restoration via numerous sources, Forest Service, NRCS, the CWCB, and BLM. And that is the end of my presentation. So again, here's my contact information. I have Esther's down here as well. If you can't read that, I'd be happy to share that out with Benton. Okay.
Just like 2 questions, and then we're gonna go to our next presentation. Questions for
What are you guys working on this summer? What are your plans for snowstorm protection this summer? As we're entering last year before.
Yeah, so we have a few projects. Yeah. So we have a few projects identified. Let's see, this is Willow Creek right here. And then this is Stillwater Creek. So last year we did, that Stillwater Creek road washout repair. So we have a project, to kind of expand on that and do some process-based restoration, just downstream of that culvert replacement or culvert upgrade. And then along Willow Creek watershed, we have another, I don't know exactly where it is on the map, but there's like this, there's this meander in Willow Creek that we're nervous is at risk of being cut off, and we're gonna lose about 1,000 feet of stream. So we're calling it an avulsion prevention project. So we're gonna be doing that, and then up Kaufman Creek right here that drains into Willow Creek. This is a really high severely burned watershed. So, but down at the valley floor, there's still a really nice floodplain. So we're gonna do some process-based restoration there and some culvert upgrades. So yeah, so 3 projects identified, big projects. We just put out an RFP for a contractor. We're going through those proposals this week.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of your biggest lessons learned?
I think at least this is from my perspective, I think some of the biggest things, some of the hardest things with, I think Cameron Peak and East Troublesome was just the fact that it occurred late in the fire season. Trying to get on the ground to do assessments within like the timelines that some of these federal programs have. It was like we were doing assessments in February with snow on the ground. So that was really difficult. And then just like the Forest Service might have some data, CWCB might have some other data, the Army Corps might have other data, and it's just like trying to figure out who has the data, where is it housed. So just like a collaboration piece was really hard. And then really just, and Laura, you can chime in too, I know you have lots of experience. Also just like the permitting, like on private lands, we still had to go through some of the federal, like cultural, permitting just to drop mulch. We weren't, doing ground disturbance, but we had to do some of those.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't ready for it. We weren't prepared.
Yeah.
We didn't have the data, like you said, to be able to make good decisions on where we were working. So now CWCB has a wildfire ready watersheds program where they are encouraging different watersheds to actually plan for wildfires so that we know what the data is, where we have data gaps, who the partners are that we should be working with, where are the most critical and at-risk watersheds, the hazards that we're trying to protect, or assets that we're trying to protect, so that we know where we need to hit the ground running after a wildfire happens.
Yeah, and kind of what you mentioned with the hazards, I mean, during those assessments, we were trying to figure out where the hazards were and like where the values at risk were. So like trying to compare, okay, well, you might have a hazard here, but there's nothing of value to protect. So we want to put our resources where there's a high hazard with values at risk downstream.
Yeah.
So and
Everything
that's
was like permitting, even with the Forest Service.
Yeah.
Like we had to truck mulch in from outside of our national forest.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a NEPA in place to actually mulch the trees. At least in our watershed, in the Wisconsin watershed. I know they did mulch.
we were able to some old timber sales that were.
All right, well, thanks, Kimberly.
Yeah, thank you.
Our next speaker, so we have Chris Carlson, who is the Stormwater Division Manager for the City of Loveland. He is a fourth generation Coloradan, a CSU Civil Engineering graduate, and the Stormwater Division Manager. He leads the Team Wisconsin River Master Plan, Loveland Stormwater Capital Improvement Program, Asset Infrastructure Management, Water Quality, Floodplain Management, and Early Flood Warning Alarm System. A lot of stuff. CCTV pipe inspection and stormwater maintenance and street sweeping. And he's going to be talking a lot about kind of the efforts to rebuild after the 2013 flood and the Big Thompson River Master Plan. Okay, so Chris, you got his. Okay, take it away. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's exciting. I've been able to do this a number of the past years. It's always a privilege for me to get to talk with you and share things from really a river perspective, but also from a Loveland perspective and something we put on the Big Thompson River. So I'm going to talk a lot about the Big T, the Big Thompson River, but a lot of this applies to any river. And I've had the privilege of my career going on 31 years now to work on rivers from Montana to Arizona, New Mexico, the whole Rocky Mountain region. And so if you have any questions related to rivers, just feel free to shout those out and try to help out with that. So another aspect of extreme events, but as we get into this, I think it's important to start with like, what is a healthy river system, a healthy river in the first place? Because that'll help us define like, where do we want to get with whether it's projects or recovery or master plans. So what is a healthy river system? Kind of jumps around. So number one, it's resilient. So think of a river in a very natural area, maybe say up in the mountains where there's no development, there's no cities or towns, and a kind of beautiful, pristine environment. So what makes that healthy? And number one is resilient. And resilient, what that means, if you haven't talked much about that word, it's just the ability to bounce back from some disaster or some problem that occurred. It's the ability to bounce back quickly, cheaply, easily. And so nature is very good at this because it's been flooding for eons, and so it can very naturally recover without problems. So once another aspect of it beyond resiliency, it's diverse and natural. That really leads into it being resilient. And a healthy river system is going to support life, health, and safety. That's clear from the environmental side, but also in an urban side, in that if a healthy river is going to protect the communities that it flows through the river, Spring Creek, Big Thompson River, those type of things. It's gonna be beautiful essential, so it has recreation benefits. It's places that we like to go to. We like to visit. We love nature and getting out, whether in recreating. So that's another part of a healthy system. And when it goes to communities, particularly, it's a public amenity. So historically in the past, and we definitely can speak from the Big Thompson side of things, is that the Big Thompson River is highly neglected, ignored, degraded. And so it was not considered a public amenity. It was considered a public nuisance. And that's what's led us to some of the problems that we're now trying to recover from. But it really can be an amenity. And because of that, it also promotes economic vitality. So there's a big environmental aspect of this, but there's also a very huge economic aspect of this. And so we'll try to cover a little bit of both of those sides. And because of that, it will save money. So a healthy river system will save money. And this is usually ends up being taxpayer money from recovering from flood events. So these are some photos from the 2013 flood specific to the Big Thompson River. So I asked this question, are we resilient? So when you look at these photos, some of these I took, some were from taken from a helicopter following the event. This happens to be Highway 287 right here, which is Lincoln Avenue. On the bridge over the Big Thompson River is right here. That's actually where the river is. You can't see the channel there, it's all flooded. So when you look at this, is this resilient? And pretty clearly, no, because so much destruction is occurring here. So we've got lots of problems. Which leads into why create a river master plan? Why spend the money and effort on creating a Big Thompson River master plan? So again, some more photos from the flood taken here.
Was this the one in 15? Or this the
2013,
Right,
September 2013.
13. We're two of them, but there was one and 150 too. wasn't there?
There's some smaller flooding
More,
events.
they did the 13, yeah.
But the real big one, so on the Big Thompson River in 2013, it was generally a 100-year flood, which is a 1% annual chance.
And there were like 50 people killed or something of that nature. Was that
There was two on Big
in
Thompson.
the Thompson?
That same flood event on the
Okay.
Cooter was about a 25-year flood
Okay,
event.
so it was,
It was all of northern Colorado. It was, in fact, it's anywhere from say 25 to 500-year event in that one storm. Pretty significant. So why have a river master plan? Well, one of the key things I learned, I knew this going in because this is my career, is that on the Big Thompson River, there had never been a master plan. There was never any, other than the floodplain mapping, there's never any study or guidance as to what should we be doing with our river corridor? How should we be managing that river corridor? And a lot of this to prepare us for flooding. So enough time goes by where a flood doesn't occur, particularly a big flood. It gets forgotten about, it's ignored. The previous big flood on the Big Thompson was in 1976, which is the largest natural disaster in Colorado history and killed 144.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, so it's 76 flood. There was previous flood in the 50s, which was also a 100-year event, 2013 flood, another 100-year event, and there's lost life in all those events. But if enough time goes by, if it's not a public priority, then we move on down the road. So when we start flood recovery efforts, it's chaos. Not only is there lots of people impacted, there's multi-million dollars of public infrastructure impacted. And so you have to very quickly shift gears and start recovery work. And I did this as a consultant for Colorado State University, also in Spring Creek flood. And so if you don't have some type of guiding plan, you're winging and you're doing things on the fly. So you do the best with what you got to work with. But that was one of the things that was very clear. And so what's interesting is like FEMA on a presidential disaster declaration such as this flood. So FEMA will provide public assistance to restore infrastructure and channel everything back to its pre-flood conditions. Essentially this. Well, pre-flood, it was a mess. Like, there were so many bad decisions made. So why would we want to spend money to get it back to what it was back before? That makes no sense, but that's how the structure of funding is set up. And so if you have a plan, you can already start using that plan to not recover the back where it was, but to do better. And so we want to make better use of our tax dollars and not build back the same thing that was there before that's going to fail again. So that really just like, we need a plan to help us for the next fall, because it's going to flood again. And whether it's this summer definitely possible. Next summer, 20 years from now, it's just a question of time. It's not a question of if. So what is in a master plan? So this is what was in our Big Thompson River master plan. This is fairly typical of most river corridor type master plans. Is there has to be some vision, like and this really goes to the community aspect. What is the community's vision, the people's vision for this corridor? What do you want it to look like? What do you want, how do you want it to function? So that was a big part of it because we had no vision for the Big Thompson. Another clearly big part is flood hazard reduction and mitigation, so that there will continue to be risks. So how do we minimize that risk? Improving resilience of both our infrastructure and the river itself. Ecological restoration, and this is because we have a one-time shot opportunity to try to provide ecological restoration where we may not get to otherwise. And some of this gets into funding structures because we can find funding for flood mitigation. We cannot find much funding for ecological restoration. So we do that as part of one project. And I've got a highlight project I'll walk you through to show you an example of that. And then part of our master plan was, now let's turn it in, let's actually view the corridor as a public amenity and let's implement better recreation and try to get the public into this nature interaction part of things. And then this is corridor management. There's never any cohesive management of the Big T. City had some pieces primarily on floodplain management side, also had some pieces on, there's lots of natural area open lands, so that gets managed. Whatever County also does the same thing. But there's definitely not a cohesion there as who does what and why and how do we coordinate together. So that was part of what went in this master plan. This is what I shared with the community when we're doing this, is we want to be definitely science-based. It's got to be community driven. So we can provide the best science, best engineering solutions, but if the community isn't behind this, it's a study report that goes on a shelf and doesn't really do good. So I would argue that the community part of this might be more important than the science part, the engineering part of it. And so we spent 50% of our effort in this master plan on community outreach in building this community vision so that whatever the science and engineering aspects could actually be implemented. Hat tip to Laura, the Big Thompson Watershed Coalition. So this is came from the River Health Assessment as part of the Coalition's Spring Management Plan. So I use this a lot in teaming with the city's master plan. So a River Health Assessment was done, which looks at a variety of aspects of, again, lots of healthy river corridor, and we grade it because everybody, you may not understand some of the science behind what goes into this, but we all remember from school our grades. And so the average grade for Loveland, D+, not good. And so all I have to do is show somebody some of this information is, in Loveland, we're getting a D+, we're failing. And then that's from a history of that. And so there's a lot of work we have to do and a lot of improvements could be made. So we use this river health assessment. That's a big part of it. An example, believe it or not, this is the Big Thompson River. It looks like an irrigation ditch, which in functionality, it is an irrigation canal. And so this happens to be through Barnes and Fairgrounds Parks in downtown Loveland, kind of a crown jewel park system for Loveland. And what makes this more of an irrigation canal is it's all impinged. So everything's been pushed in and so it only carries the water it needs to carry for water delivery, not for a natural river or flood system. It may be a little hard to tell the banks. These aren't natural banks, of course. So they're lined with concrete rubble. Here's some curving together. There are buried car bodies cabled around this bin. So it's just junk. And so when you take a natural river and you push it all in, you channelize it. And so now the water doesn't have a good place to go. So when it does flood, because it will flood, the water is going to go faster and it's going to have higher velocities, higher stress, which means it's going to tear everything up. So how do you respond to that? In the old days, you respond by putting junk on the banks. Otherwise, the banks get trashed. We keep making these decisions. And so another aspect is what I drew in red lines here is kind of a multi-stage channel. So there should be a low flow channel. There should be benches where the floodplain can spread out to any natural channel, this type of thing. So in a channel that's been urbanized and heavily impacted, usually is missing all these components to a natural function. Another big aspect of our river master plan is the maintenance and public safety aspects of it. Because the corridor has never been maintained, we've got a lot to do, and that has to be a big part of it. Some of these photos is concrete rubble on the banks again, because there was erosion here. Because the channel's been so pushed in, and so to solve that erosion, well, we had some concrete from doing some sidewalk repairs, so let's dump that in there. So that's the kind of thing we've got to clean up and address as part of it. Other things that you may not think of, this happens to be was a bridge crossing of the river. This is Taft Avenue Bridge. If you notice there's one cell of the bridge where water can, pretty easily move through. The other cell has got 4 feet plus of sediment in it. And so even though there's a bridge opening there, the bridge opening is not effective. And so it's already, just by the sediment that's there, the bridge is undersized to begin with, and now we allow sediment. So that's part of maintenance, is keeping even our structures functional so they can perform how they were originally intended to. And then there's lots of things like down trees. From an environmental perspective, down trees is good because this provides habitat and for both fish and wildlife. In a high public use corridor, that is bad. This particular stretch, there's lots of kids tube the river in the summer when the water flows are nice. Well, you put logs like that and down trees in the river, that becomes called a strainer. If you've done any kayaking or rafting, this is a serious public health safety problem because somebody could very easily get hung up on those trees with the water flowing through. So we have public safety issues in areas where the public's heavily using the corridor. So I'm going to spend most of the rest of my time here just talking about a specific project, an example project. This happens to be the largest project in the River Corridor Master Plan. And I'd like to just highlight some of the aspects of the project, but why do this? Why spend the effort into it? And how does this fit into managing extreme events, large flood events? The Big Thompson River I mentioned earlier is a 100-year flood event. What that means here is a little over 19,000 cubic feet per second of water, which is a lot of water. And so this happens to be an aerial photo taken a day after the flood. It's not completely clear, but you can see the road crossings that are still largely underwater. This is Highway 287 here, largely underwater. So flood moves down this direction here. Because this channel has no capacity, because it's been pinched in from my earlier photos, and there's no longer a natural floodplain because it's all developed. And so prior to, say, on the Big Thompson, 1981 was the first floodplain map. So prior to 1981, there were no floodplain regulations, there were no floodplain maps. And so it was free for all. So you could build anything you wanted anywhere in this corridor, and there's no regulations that prevent that.
Even after the 76 flood?
Oh, yeah.
There's no regulations.
You think?
Lessons
learned. Yeah, and so with this one, and this is largely how part of how the coalition got created is after this flood, there were some folks who were around in 1976. They saw the recovery and they said, we cannot let this happen again. We can't just go back, build it back. And so that's how the coalition started, by a group of local citizens and landowners, and said, we don't want this to go again. We got to make better decisions. But you're right. After the 76 flood, nothing changed. So these are some flood photos specifically from this reach of the river. Again, the highway here. This happens to be the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad tracks, which were over top, and embankment failed, creating a whole other set of problems the railroads do. Which lead us to our project. And so coming out of the flood, this particular area of the river, we had a little under $10 million in public infrastructure damages. That's in 2013 dollars, which would be, say, $18, $19 million-ish in today's dollars of inflation. So huge amount of damage just to public infrastructure. Another multi-million dollars worth of damage to public or private infrastructure. There's businesses on the highway corridor here. All those businesses were flooded. They were shut down for months. So if you imagine you're a small business owner, this flood has a major impact, and you may not be able to survive as a business owner. So this project was, we knew we had to upsize the bridge. The bridge was vastly undersized, particularly for a US highway system. This bridge had a capacity for a 10-year event. Most US highways have a minimum of 50-year capacity, if not 100-year capacity. So that was a big part of it, but then we discovered when you did all the modeling, we put a bigger bridge in, the water couldn't get to the bridge because it's just going all over the place up there. So that creates a larger project of completely rebuilding the floodplain. We create as natural floodplain as we can get, given other constraints, so that we could get the water to the bridge, so we get under the highway and move on down. So this little graphic here shows a little bit of a vision for what that's gonna be. As an engineer, and this nerdy stuff, I love this. So we do two-dimensional modeling. I won't get into the details, but this is just cool stuff. So this Railroad Avenue is here, but we can do hydraulic modeling, and the colors here show velocity. So the little arrows are velocity vectors. It shows where the water is moving, the direction, and the colors tell us like how fast it's going. And so like this red, this would be pushing 16 feet per second velocity. So if you wanted to build something, this is not the place to do it, because it will get ripped up. And then other areas where it's very high velocity, like, okay, now you can work more with that, because it's not gonna get torn up as easily. So this guides us a lot is in the design and the engineering as to what type of treatment and measures you can do where to handle these flow velocities. So it's pretty cool stuff. A big part of the project is incorporating nature-based solutions on the environmental side. So we want to restore this channel floodplain connectivity, which doesn't exist today. So what that means is when water fills up the channel, it should naturally spread out nice and gradually into a floodplain where then it waters the cottonwood trees. And when it spreads out, then that reduces the velocities, which then doesn't tear things to the smithereens. So that's what we mean by channel floodplain connectivity. Generally there, or restore the riparian vegetation through it, in-stream channel variability, that basically helps the fish and the critters and the wildlife. I mean, not the irrigation ditch, straight channel, by having the different types of structures in there. Sediment transport is a biggie. All rivers are constantly carrying sediment. So if you change or mess that up, you'll get either erosion, which means it's pulling sediment out and you gotta deal with those problems, or you get deposition where it's dumping sediment and you have to deal with those problems. Carolyn mentioned the fire stuff. So even in Loveland, which is well below where the fire burner is, there's a shocking amount of sediment and black silt washed down in the last couple of years. Anytime there's rain up on the Cameron burn, you just see this black mush. And so that's all part of having good consideration for sediment transport, because we have to deal with those on above us. Water quality is a big thing, wetlands and connected habitats. Well, finally, here's some of these project benefits from this. Half this project is a transportation project. The highway, the large bridge, the other half is a river project. And so some of the benefits we're going to see from it is the resilience aspect of it. When it does flood again, we will not have $20 million worth of damages in this corridor again once the project's built. So that piece of it, economic, is going to certainly help those businesses. Where instead of the floodplain being all over the place, we're going to put it where it really needs to be, which those businesses will be removed from the floodplain, so they can develop or redevelop without having the high flood risk that they do today. So that's a huge economic driver there. Then on the environmental side, we can finally provide ecological restoration to an area that was really altered probably starting 100 years ago. And then the recreation aspect of it too. So we're going to implement all of this in the project design, which is underway right now. We're hoping for construction in 2026, once we get through a NEPA federal environmental permitting process, which is gigantic and complicated.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. You guys know. So I know I went through that really fast. I've got a handout regarding this project. If you have more interest or you want to read more, I'll just pass that around. Otherwise, we're happy to take any questions.
How is this all gonna be paid for? What's the funding mechanism?
Yeah, this isn't cheap. Yeah, so the river master plan itself was total cost of that was like $52 million in 2018 when we did the master plan. So that's a gigantic amount of money. The flood mitigation pieces of this is about $32 million or $38 million, depending on how that goes again. Still, again, so there's different mechanisms for that. We prepared a financial plan looking at as many alternatives as we could. How would you start funding implementation? So that took that was a couple of year effort. Portland City Council approved that financial plan in summer 2022. And really what that did was, Portland has a stormwater utility, which is what I manage. And it was essentially taking the river and the master plan and putting that under the umbrella of the stormwater utility. So we can use utility fee revenue to help fund this. It won't fund it all because it's still many millions of dollars. So that's a big piece of it, was now we can use utility funds to do that. Grant funding is another aspect of it. And so the good thing, particularly like this Highway 287 project, because of the transportation nexus, the economic side, the environmental side, the flood mitigation, there's a lot of grant money out there. So we received a $2.3 million grant just to do the design. And we're pretty confident that we'll be eligible for federal funding for construction. So we're gonna go after grants full board. And if we don't get those grants, our financial plan is set up so that we'll bond, where we keep spending on revenue mortgage debt at a low rate, and then we'll use the revenue fees to pay off that debt.
Has that bond been approved by the voters or?
Yeah, it has to be approved by, this is very unique in the financing thing. So because of the utility, which is an enterprise fund, it is not under the TABOR umbrella. So it does not have to be approved by the voters at large. So but it does have to be approved by the representatives, which is city council. So city council does have to approve that, and that's. Yeah, so that's the way it works here.
Maybe you want to take it to the phone.
Take one other question? Yeah.
Sure, so I'm in this area all the time, so this is all gonna change down there, is what you're saying, based on this plan.
Yes.
And what's your goal to get it off the ground in a year? Are you hoping that it's done in this?
Yeah, we started and we kicked off design in this last September, so September 23, we started designing. We're gonna do, design continue all through this year and all through next year. Environmental permitting starts this summer, it'll go all next year. So if all the pieces come together and the funding pieces, that's another aspect of pulling together the right finance for this. Our goal is to start construction in the winter of 26.
So like long-term plans, there you go.
Yeah, and that's just this one project.
Right.
The master plan itself has 30 years worth of projects. So it's very long term. Because of the funding to build it, it's not that.
Longevity of your master plan, because typically master plans, like when you look at the utility side, the water and the sewer side, they're much shorter than that. So it seems like this one has a long longevity just by link these projects, so.
Yeah, so it's a 30-year plan.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is reasonable to assume somewhere in 30 years, things change. And there could be another flood in 30 years that makes some of the assumptions put into this different. And so we'll go with a 30-year plan, but we're definitely, open as things change. If it's 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we can update it and then take that back to the public and council if there's a reason to do that. But if it doesn't change, we're on a 30-year trajectory.
Basically, what's there today was basically replaced with what was there before the flood, is what we're. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So sorry, like the fairgrounds, the park, everything down there today is basically what was there before the flood. Like, we haven't done any sort of improvements, we're just replacing time.
I'd say 90%, yes.
Yeah.
10% has been improved, but you just can't see it.
Sure. That's crazy to think of.
All right, well, let's give Chris a minute.
Until 10:40. If you have other questions, maybe these folks can stick around for another 5 minutes and ask some questions, and we'll be back in.
Real
Oh,
quickly,
Yeah.
there's a webinar being hosted in the other meeting rooms, so if you're out in the lobby, please try to talk really quietly or hang out in here or like take calls or anything out in the patio area. But yeah, they're in a webinar, so like try to be quiet a little bit out in the lobby. No, I think you're doing great right now. It's a good time they mentioned that.
So I think.
Cool, cool. Yeah, no, the group was awesome. I didn't really know too well about Dustin. I did actually attend this last year, and it actually really like, they do it. Yeah, I was testing it off. Yeah, I mean, I had no idea. I genuinely had not do it. That presentation, I was like, wow, they do a whole lot. Especially for the waterfowl, like what they do for like just the small watershed, it's unbelievable. Yeah, it would be cool to hear from them. I really enjoyed the presentation last year. I felt like it was really helpful. Yeah, you know. Cool, really. Yeah, get the experience. Oh, cool, okay.
Yeah, that was yeah.
Yeah, we did a drinking water, we actually toured, in November. And then we also did, a meeting at Northern Water, one of their random meeting areas. Yeah, so we do that, we try to do that every year, because, yeah, Brad's always really nice to us, and see everything. Yeah, so it's always a good time. Check it out more than water, and everybody always wants to learn about CBT, like that's one of the first things that we gotta talk about every class. If we don't talk about CBT, then we're missing a big piece of the central story. Hey, great to meet you. Feel free to kind of join us over here, we got all these areas. See, you and Laura, we rock it together.
Yeah.
Presentation.
Awesome. So in about 10 minutes after this break, we'll get started. If you want to grab any sacks or tricks or anything, feel free.
Is there a ability to present from live or is it new developers?
If it would be on that, the easiest for like the recording purposes. Is that possible?
Yeah.
That should be fine. If you were planning to present with PDF anyway.
Well, otherwise I can present. It's.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I guess.
Yeah, if you'd like to do that.
Okay. Denver.
Yeah, you can, I have an external keyboard, my keyboard doesn't really work too well, so yeah, use the external keyboard.
That's exactly what we're doing today. Yeah.
Right.
So you spend a lot of time in that area. I spent 3 summers and 3 winters at Sea Lady.
I mean, I got
Pretty familiar with that.
probably well more than some videos. I realized it after we like talked about who wasn't here too, I was like, okay, maybe this is why I got less responses than I thought I should have had. So yeah, we definitely will have enough extra meals.
Yeah,
That's what I'm thinking. Yes. Yeah, but like some people have said like, they don't want anything, and then they do stay. And then they do stay, and I'm like, oh, well, I guess I probably should have. Yeah. So I got more than enough today that if almost everybody, actually, if every single guest stayed, we'd have enough. Knowing that we have 5 people not here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so the stage you're gathering was successful, but we're having that.
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, good, okay, yes. It's like, I thought you actually. I just forgot, good, okay, well, let me know if you need anything.
Thank you so much. Yeah, really appreciate it. Nice meeting you.
Nice.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
It seems like the flow is gonna be really good. From this too, I was interested to see because like talking about the climate change piece, everybody's gonna be, it sounds like sediment's the name of the game for everybody.
Yeah.
And the reforestation piece was funny because I've gone to some big big time watershed pollution meetings. And I know that they're like the biggest thing that they're doing is reforestation. So that's funny that somebody asked about that with the Forest Service, because that's exactly what's happening. Oh, that's what I was gonna see if I could fix this. It looks like everything's.
Oh, were you still on the top?
We'll see. There was like on one of those slides, I think on one of Kimberly's slides, it said for the camera be cars, that was but there was a one that was over, it was 190. So, yeah, and I saw it on my screen, because my screen had the full, it did there, I was like, oh, that's kind of, that's like, it's important, that's 100, I was making this.
It's really cool. That's very good.
It's a nice morning, yeah. Has you been with the coalition? Wow, wow. Okay, yeah, actually, I know one person from my undergrad.
Yes.
I'm hoping to do the same. Here's that. Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Is that what led you into this world? I like that program. I'm actually still in my first program in public health. So I was like, public administration, you want me to do public policy? Yeah, they created that public policy and administration program, and I was like, which one do you want? Do you want to focus on public or do you want to focus on the administration? Yeah, so I chose the public health. I feel like I do more administration.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll be graduating soon, so I won't be actually until next year.
Yeah, yeah, I know there's. But I do know, yeah, well, I know that's one of the guys that I admire to be.
Oh, yeah.
Do y'all witness administration, city watershed so often?
Yeah, especially, since camp each time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, they're also our sisters. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How long have you worked for that cohort?
Large, over 3 years.
And then I've been in this position for over a year.
Yeah. Yeah, so I used
It's really.
I know, I'm just saying, probably talking about what.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome.
But in the meantime, I think
They should be able to get.
Right, we're gonna get started pretty fast.
I have a lot of this.
Benton, do you just want to elaborate on the institutional scene?
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe start now, we're getting real big.
The back up is like.
Like herding cats and.
Yeah.
There you go.
More folks in the room. And we did have some announcements or I guess considerations from the Community Foundation of Northern Colorado regarding our space. Do you have that?
Yeah, no, they just asked that we use the lobby as little as we can for like conversations and side conversations and things. Because they have a lot of meetings in other spaces, just like generally, even beyond just the webinar they're doing right now. Just generally, if we can use that space minimally or just be quiet when we are, like when we grab our lunches, just like come back in here if you could, as opposed to hanging out there. That would just help them out with their meetings that they have going on all the time. Yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty much like the big number one thing.
Out there, she's like active, and so if we're
Yeah.
like loud and talking out there, she's like, can't really work. So just a consideration, thanks. Okay, so our next set of speakers, we're gonna talk more about our river programs and park projects. Very excited to have, first we're gonna have Megan, and I did not ask how to pronounce your last name.
It's male like he.
Male and Heath. She is the Communications Outreach and Marketing Manager for the Coalition of the Poudre River Watershed. And we'll have our very own Laura Petrini, she's the Executive Director of the Big Thompson Watershed Coalition. And are you guys doing like a combo presentation? Okay.
Yeah.
So let me talk about Megan a little bit first. She grew up on the Front Range with fascination of outdoors. She was at the age of 18, a whitewater rafting guide. She received her master's of public administration with certificates in nonprofit management and environmental policy and management and law from University of Colorado's Denver School of Public Affairs. She, as communications outreach and marketing manager, she works to further CPRW's mission of improving and maintaining the ecological health of the Poudre River and sharing her critical work with the wider public. And Laura, do I need to introduce you?
It's the same.
She needs no introduction, right? Okay, well, go ahead.
Yeah, so like Karen said, we are co-presenting. We have very similar organizations that focus a lot on same type of work. We are all working to, on Cameron Peak Fire recovery efforts. So actually a lot of, or some of this presentation is actually going to be a little bit repetitive of what Kimberly was talking about. And I try to kind of gloss over that, but get to the point a little bit.
Real quick there, now.
Okay, so just where we're going with this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about our organizations, what our missions are. We're going to cover a little bit about watershed health and why it's important. Talk about the wildfire impacts, and again, this is what Kimberly talked about, so we'll probably kind of breeze through that. Megan will talk more in depth about what we each have been doing for wildfire recovery for the Cameron Peak Fire. And then I'll close it out with the work that we're doing, trying to reduce wildfire risk and mitigate for the fuel loads that are out on our landscape. Yeah, so I'll just briefly introduce the Coalition for the Fear of the Watershed. We are your local watershed group here if you live in Fort Collins or Greeley, Windsor, Timness. So it's a really large area. You can see here, it's about the size of Rhode Island. It starts up in Rocky Mountain National Park, and the headwaters are, goes all the way down to the confluence of the South Platte and Greeley. A lot of different types of terrain in the watershed. So you have the upper watershed, which is forested. You have the beautiful Poudre Canyon that runs through there, and then all the way into the Great Plains. So it's a really beautiful area. Our organization started after the Hyde Park fire in 2012. There was a massive fire at the time, 90,000 acres. We thought that was huge. Little did we know Cameron Peak was coming, but we were started after that. And then in 2013 became a 501c3 officially, because we also experienced flooding after the fires. So our mission is to improve and maintain the ecological health of the Poudre River watershed through, most importantly, community collaboration, which we're going to talk a lot about today. We really can't do any of our work without collaboration. Our programs, our focus areas are forests, rivers. Those are obviously very interconnected and intertwined. Wildfire has an impact on all of those aspects. Science and monitoring, or as we call it, adaptive management, but no one knows what that means. So science and monitoring is really an important part of our work, making sure what we're doing is working. If it's not, making changes moving forward. So, and then what we're doing today, community outreach and education is a big part of what I do and my passion. So excited to be here with you all today. And then the Big Thompson Watershed Health Coalition, our mission is working with others to take action to improve, protect, and restore the health and vitality of the Big Thompson River watershed for the use of our communities. And we formed, like Chris said, after the flood of 2013, responding to a disaster, right? So in 2020, we actually did a strategic planning process. And disaster recovery continues to be a huge part, one of our major programs that we focus on. Little did we know that we would soon be responding to the Cameron Peak fire. So responding to floods, responding to forest fires. We do have a forest health and management program also, and I'll touch more on this a little bit later, but again, to reduce the fuel loads that are out in our forested landscape to make our forests more resilient to these large catastrophic wildfires. We have the Stream and Water Resources Program, Chris mentioned, our stream management plan that we developed for a 15-mile stretch between the canyon mouth and I-25, where we did give grades to these different reaches of the Big Thompson River, where it did grade pretty poorly. So working with the city of Loveland and other partners, stakeholders to improve the resilience of the river to, more potential disasters. And then like CPRW, education and outreach is incorporated into all of those programs. Both together, we do have a shared vision of a healthy and resilient northern Colorado watersheds that can support healthy wildfires, sustainable wildfires without causing long-term damage to our watershed services and communities. So that's really important. I'll talk a little bit later about what is a healthy wildfire. But first, I want to make sure we're all on the same playing grounds. What is a watershed? So it's a land area from which surface water drains into a common area. So a stream, lake, reservoir, other body of water, and there are clear boundaries to the watershed. And it's worth noting that in Colorado, anywhere from 50 to 90% of stream water flows come from snowmelt. So a lot of our mountains where we have snowmelt, that is our source water for all the water that we use. And why are healthy watersheds important? So, some of the reading material that I've been looking at reading from this class, the Confluence book. I'm also reading A Land Made from Water, which will be presenting on next month. But, you know, water is integral in the history of settlement in Colorado, across the West. It's very important. Development of communities has, you know, really happened hand in hand or adjacent to wherever we have water. So it's important for, our watersheds are important for the ecological services they provide. You know, anywhere from rainfall runoff, sediment transport, like Chris was talking about, groundwater recharge, and, you know, the aesthetics that it provides, wildlife habitat. And then our communities use it for municipal reasons, drinking water, stormwater, use it for irrigation, you know, you all know this. So it's really important to make sure that, you know, we can sustain our watersheds and make sure that they are healthy. But there are a number of ways that watersheds can be disrupted and you know, we can have unhealthy rivers. So what contributes to an unhealthy watershed? You know, a lot of people think, well, maybe it's the trash in the rivers. That's not the biggest thing. So actually, pollution of our waterways consists of sediment, bacteria like E. coli, excess nutrients can pollute our waterways. Land management and land use will also have a big impact on our water systems, you know, anywhere from development, making roads, grazing, agriculture. And then, as Kimberly talked about, climate change is going to have a huge, and already has been having a huge impact on our watersheds, with increasing droughts, increasing wildfires, and we're seeing increasing in flooding as well, or increases in flooding. So we all live in a watershed. The Poudre and the Big Thompson watersheds, you know, make up the majority of Larimer County. But one thing I want to point out, and you might have noted it when Megan was talking, this green area of our watersheds, what do you think that signifies?
Say that again.
The green area of the watersheds, what do you think it signifies? Yes, our forests. Yes.
Trees.
So our forested areas of the watersheds actually provide a huge ecological service for where we get our water from. I mentioned that 50 to 90% of Colorado's source water comes from our forested systems. So they actually help protect our water systems. So the way that works is when rainfall happens, the canopies intercept the rainfall, you know, basically slowing down the rain as it is coming to the ground, reducing the chances for soil disruption. Someone asked about the area mulching earlier, and that is really the purpose of it, so to reduce soil disruption. And the roots and the trees all help to stabilize the soil as water is running down the hill slopes, making sure that we aren't seeing a ton of erosion. Roots also help with groundwater recharge, allowing for increased infiltration. And then the canopies also provide evapotranspiration functions that help to regulate precipitation in our region. And in understanding this, that forests do provide an ecological and community service for us, a lot of municipalities have started building these source water protection plans. So like Kimberly said, that's her job, like she's a source water protection specialist. So Northern Water is actually going through a very similar process right now, trying to make plans for protecting the areas where we source our water from. So like she mentioned before also, you know, in the last 10 years, we are seeing this increase of larger wildfire events across the landscape. See, so the blue area here is the Poudre watershed. 60% of the Poudre watershed forested area has burned over the last 10 to 11 years. So that's really significant when you're thinking about Fort Collins water, Greeley's water coming from this area. You saw this slide with Kimberly's presentation. So basically what I want to, I mentioned how the forest system functions normally in a healthy situation, but when rain falls and there isn't the canopy to intercept the rainfall, it hits the ground, disturbs the soil or the ash, it starts flowing down the hill. The other thing that's happening in an area that's burned, sometimes the soil burns so severely that the water or the soil actually becomes hydrophobic. So it won't even absorb into the water, into the ground. So it's just flowing across the landscape. And because none of it or very little of it is getting absorbed by the ground, I mean, we're just talking about huge volumes and velocities of water that are flowing into our water systems. And this is what we typically see after any rainfall event in your landscape. So huge amounts of water, carrying lots of sediment. The other thing, that's happening because of the volumes of water coming down, we're seeing lots of erosion that are altering our watershed processes. Once the water starts getting funneled to those systems, more and more and more erosion. So these gullies are forming across the landscape. The excess sediment and nutrients entering the water system are causing fish die-offs. They're also obviously a huge problem for municipalities. I know Loveland has, before the fire, they had to shut off their water intake for natural turbidity reasons, like maybe 24 hours a year. So after the fire, they've had to shut it down from anywhere 22 days to 24 days because of turbidity coming from the fire. And then, like Kimberly mentioned, we're seeing, all of this volume of water coming down the landscape is picking up pebbles, sticks, trees, boulders are being carried by this water and taking out homes, taking out culverts, taking out roads. So not only is it a hazard to our infrastructure, but it is also a hazard to lives. Big Thompson watershed lost 2 people in 2022. Great. So we're going to dig in a little bit deeper to the Cameron Peak fire, which was over 200,000 acres. Raise your hand if you were around when that was burning. So you'll probably never forget it. I know I won't, especially the smoke. But yeah, it burned for a long time too. It was, again, massive fire, starting in the pretty high up in the watershed, upper watershed. But burning all the way to Horseshoes, Masonville area. So you can see green in the green there, that was one of the big runs that it made, and then orange is that other big run. So yeah, just an incredible fire, still the largest in Colorado history, and we're still working every day to try to mitigate a lot of these impacts that Laura talked about.
What are those colors look like?
So those are all I believe associated with different dates and different kind of runs that it made. I think but you can also see an animated version of this. It's some of the websites out there. But yeah, I won't go through every single point here, but obviously had a huge impact. Over 1,000 stream miles burned. A handful of the big reservoirs up in the upper watershed were burned, some of them completely all around the reservoir. So that's why we work so closely with Greeley, because a lot of the reservoirs are owned by Greeley. Hundreds of trail miles, 3 different watersheds affected, mainly Pooter and Big Thompson, but Laramie watershed as well. And again, 5 reservoirs. Thankfully, I don't think anyone was killed, which is incredible, but a lot of structures were burned. This graphic kind of blows my mind when I look at this, just when I talk about collaboration, starting with fire response and communication. So, all the way into restoration, planning and mitigation for the future. So this is a massive effort at all different levels of government, nonprofit, not to toot our own horns or anything, but Big T and CPRW, you can see are in a lot of these
areas of recovery, and that's because local watershed groups are absolutely integral to wildfire recovery. So you'll see, let me see the next one here. So, yeah, so you'll see here, we, starting within, I think about the first meeting held with all of these groups was within a week of the fire starting. So we learned from the Hyde Park fire that like, we gotta move quick, we need to get organized, we need to get people together, communicating well. And so all these different groups were put together. The one highlight is the Water Recovery Working Group. That was led by CPRW's, original executive director, Jen Kavexis. But that was where we kind of came in and took the lead along with Big T. And then you can see all these other kind of aspects of recovery, infrastructure, public and environmental health, community support, economic health, all these different factors. But again, this was being organized within a week of the fire starting because they knew it was going to be a big one just with the conditions. And I think it was a pretty dry summer. And so there was definitely a concern that it was going to be a big one. Let's see. So the recovery process, it starts right away with the planning. But we know that wildfire recovery can take up to 10 years. So it can take a long time for a watershed to recover from a fire. And we're kind of in uncharted territory nowadays with these really big, high severity fires, really big acreage. So, 10 years, it might be double that. But yeah, the planning process, starts right away, but then after the fire is out, we kind of get into prioritization of where we're gonna do work on the ground once the fire is out. And I'm gonna get a little bit more into that because that's a really important piece of the puzzle. And then where we're at now is implementing projects. We've been doing that for about 3 years now, 3.5 years, so. All right, so this is kind of a busy map, but I'm gonna explain a little bit, it'll make a little bit more sense here, but this is the watershed hazardous treatment and targeting prioritization. So with such a large area, we know we don't have enough resources, time, money, people, like we know that we're dealing with especially money. So we have to prioritize where we're gonna do the work. So we worked with consultants and scientists to essentially combine 4 different components: soil burn severity, hill slope erosion modeling, debris flow hazards, and then composite road hazards. And you put all those layers together, and then you get these different priority areas. We'll focus in on the red because that's where we are really focusing our work is that those are the most high priority sub watersheds that we decide to work in. And you can see in the blue there, that's some of the aerial mulching work that was completed. You'll see also areas that we did in yellow, and that might be for different reasons. It might not be like the most high priority, but it might be a life and safety issue or water storage. So there's different reasons why. So we don't rely just on the model, and we also communicate with each other and talk and use on the ground knowledge of where we really need to prioritize work. Next one here. So I'm going to talk about some of the different treatments that we've done, and these apply to both the Poudre and Big Thompson watershed. So we work really closely together to fundraise, to share consultants, to share resources. A lot of meetings together. A lot of meetings, yeah. So it really is a joint effort. So this applies to both watersheds, and you can chime in at any point if you'd like. But the aerial mulching program, this was a massive effort that went over a 2-year period. I think we spent over $20 million on this effort, mainly state funding from the Colorado Water Conservation Board. But I think you guys have talked a bit about it, but essentially using material mostly on site. It's burned trees that are chipped and then chipped on site and then picked up by the helicopters and dropped just hundreds and hundreds of times. They just pick them up and drop these, bags of mulch over the hill slopes to really try to add that roughness to the slope and try to reduce, essentially those black water debris flows and runoff.
The grasses in there, mulch too, or?
No, there's no seed, nothing added, no wood straw or anything like that. It's just pure wood mulch. Especially, we did have permission from the Forest Service to mulch on Forest Service lands, and was very important to them that there was no seed or anything in there. So,
They're worried about weeds getting in the seed source.
yeah.
They were worried about weeds getting in the seed source.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
So,
you.
so we, with that prioritization process, we identified over 10,000 acres that needed to be completed. And then 1,500 acres in the Big T. And I think in total, we did about 9,200 acres. So we almost hit that 10,000 plus acre. At the time, it was the largest wood mulch operation that was ever undertaken in the country. I think, unfortunately now New Mexico unfortunately because they had that massive fire, but, but they, I think, also tried the same, techniques as we did and had an even bigger operation there, but there's still a lot of research being done on aerial mulching and, the effects and impacts and whether it is, a good use of money. So like I said, we are kind of in uncharted territories in addressing these really high severity burns. But also, focusing on water quality protection, which we're kind of, more into that phase after year 1 and 2 of aerial mulching. We're kind of getting into this more point-based, mitigation work. So these projects are also intended to slow erosion, in some of the headwater streams that, flow into the main stem of the Poudre. And again, to protect that downstream water quality. I see a brewer in the room. Protect our craft beer. But yeah, just really important, for trying to keep sediment, ash, nutrients out of the river. So some examples of that, are a lot of these are what we call low-tech process-based restoration. So techniques like creating log jams. We'll go in a little bit more into some of the post-assisted log structures that we're doing. But these are trying to help establish or reestablish the natural stream processes by reconnecting the stream with the floodplain and the adjacent wetlands and trying to re-wet those areas. And those can really create great sediment sinks and also improve water quality. And we've done over 400 treatments or installed over 400 treatments and structures on both public and private lands. So it's been, really big partnership between Forest Service and private landowners.
So I don't get it, the trees are put down.
Yes, so thank you
And then they have
for,
no set, and then they slow the water,
yes.
just to slow it down.
Yeah, to slow, so these are all trees that are just felled on site, so cut on site. A lot of them are burnt trees. It's kind of a process that might happen naturally in a burn area, but we're kind of trying to speed it up a little. And essentially what you're doing is like creating these speed bumps within these stream systems to slow water, create these kind of messier rivers, which is a natural way of you would see a river, before humans came along.
But when you slow the water down, the sediment drops out.
Right,
Sure.
yeah.
Gotcha.
And so one of the pictures that I showed earlier where the erosion just keeps digging down into the
Creating more
scour landscape. So when we put structures in like a spot like that, it helps to build the bottom of that stream system back up again.
Is there issue that sediment stay in the river? Like, is there an argument you want to like flush out in the long term?
But in a way, yes. We do want sediment transport to be happening in our water systems, but, because of the erosion that's happening, I mean, we're talking about huge amounts of water that are carrying huge amounts of sediment that are a problem for our infrastructure. Like on Buckhorn Road and the Big Thompson watershed, for example, we had an area where the debris flow got clogged up in the culvert. and like 20 feet of sediment and debris built up behind that culvert that started toppling over onto Buckthorn Road, which was just finished by the county, the previous summer, so.
That is a good question, and there are people, at CSU studying that very question, because, you know, I think with wildfire, especially good fire, I mean, you are gonna have some of that sediment transport, but these high severity burns where you lose your entire canopy, that's where we're seeing like a huge imbalance. So,
Yeah, I was gonna ask at the end, but now I'm prompted by your good fire remark. I guess I'm just wondering like how much data and information we have on those good fires in our system and like, you know, what are the impacts of those fires to water quality versus like these extreme fires and like the infrastructure that we've built up to the point of today. Like maybe in the past, like when we're thinking about these good fires, we just didn't have the infrastructure that was being so severely impacted. I'm just, like, it seems like there's maybe a little bit of both and like, yes, these are very severe fires and they're causing like lots of sediment runoff, which is impacting our infrastructure, but we just have way more infrastructure to protect now.
yeah, I think that's a good point, for sure. I think it's a little bit of both. We have a long-term, water quality monitoring program at CPRW. And it's all led by citizen scientists in partnership with, Rocky Mountain Research Station. So we have many years of data looking at water quality in areas that, have experienced prescribed fire and then areas that have experienced high severity wildfire. And so we can look at that data and see that prescribed fire has far less of an impact on water quality than like these types of fires.
The prescribed fires, the scale is so, I'm thinking of like natural, like.
Low severity,
Low severity.
low and moderate, and I think there's definitely, some science out there. Haven't done the literature review, but I think there's definitely some stuff you can find out there about that.
Sorry for the.
Oh, no, it's all good points.
So, after there's a terrible fire, there's always, well, first and second guessing, I guess, some of that conversation is about forest management. The state of California gets slaughtered, you know, a lot of criticism because they're not managing the forest, I guess. Where were we on this and what are the lessons learned after these big fires about preventative forest management?
Yeah,
I'll touch on
Maybe you're gonna
that
get into
later.
that.
yeah, no, that's a great question, and so, yeah, we're definitely, the presentation is gonna lead to that, because
Okay.
that is a big piece of the puzzle moving forward, trying to create more resilient, forests, watersheds. So this slide here just goes a little bit more into this, low-tech process-based restoration. A lot of it, trying to model what you might see beavers do on the landscape, so, we're definitely excited about some of this work because it is, like I said, lower cost. And volunteers can be a big part of this work, which is great. These are volunteers from Wildlands Restoration Volunteers, WRV, on one of our project sites, and I'm gonna talk about right here. So this is, Upper Elkhorn Creek. And this is a site that was, completely burned, high severity. You can see everything's totally tarred, but a really beautiful abandoned beaver meadow. These blue dotted lines there, those are the abandoned, those are the old beaver dams. This site was identified as a spot where we could, really slow down some of the water, re-wet the meadow, reconnect some of the floodplains, and hopefully reduce a lot of that ash and debris and sediment from going into the main stem. So that this is a tributary to the Poudre River. So, just to give you an example of how this sediment kind of builds up behind these structures. So this is one of the post-assisted log structures here, that these gentlemen are standing on top of. They're standing on top of that abandoned beaver, or that old beaver dam. And behind it, you can see that it is completely full of water. So it worked really well to slow the water. There's still water moving through it, but a lot slower. And then, once runoff kind of ended and we came back to this site, the water had dropped down a bit, but all behind it was just feet of sediment that had been captured. So these structures are really doing exactly what we want them to do in helping to catch a lot of that debris and ash and sediment from the fire.
Also mention something. So before, when I was talking about watershed health and that, you know, our goal is to build a more resilient watershed, resilient to drought, wildfires, and flooding. This is not only fire recovery, but this is preparing our landscape to be drought resistant in the future. So the fact that we're reconnecting the floodplain where, you know, where that berm broke through, if we can get beavers back on the landscape, that would be great. So we could have these pockets of green all across our forested, dry landscape where it could act as fire breaks if a wildfire were to come through. So we
So
wouldn't.
instead of bringing wolves to Colorado, let's bring beavers.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, boy.
There is a place for beavers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Place for everything. Okay, so one thing that brings up a couple other, things I wanted to mention here too. We also, with all these projects, we also do willow, planting and other riparian plantings. Cause as you can kind of see in this picture, like, if you're a beaver, you're probably not gonna survive there in this land. There's no riparian vegetation. But we hope that eventually, by replanting and over years of regrowth, that this could be an environment where beavers might return. So we won't be dropping any beavers from airplanes or anything like that at this location, but we're not doing any reintroduction. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those videos, but look them up on YouTube. There's some, so yeah, they did that like in the 50s or 60s in Idaho. They would drop them from airplanes into, it's pretty great.
It's the next of slow turn.
So yeah, this is a spot that we hope to actually add more structures to, and then you know, hopefully in a couple of years or so, we might see the beavers come.
We've got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, sorry. So just a list of projects just for this year that Big T and the Pooter have coming up, and at this one of the locations in the Pooter Canyon. So you can see we have a lot of work still going on. Oh gosh, okay, sorry, I'm way behind. So we're also doing reforestation. This involves working primarily with ponderosa pine, because we're seeing that ponderosa pine is not coming back well in these high severity burn areas. Seed collection is a big part of this, and then volunteers helping to plant trees, and we've planted over 25,000 trees.
On private lands.
Yeah, on private lands only. So, like I said, an insane amount of money to do this work. I think it might be more than 25 million, but it's a lot of different funders at all different levels, including the community foundation. So I'm gonna hand it off to Laura.
Yeah.
Sorry if I.
No, it's okay.
That's speeding through these things.
So what, you know, Megan mentioned that we've been spending maybe more than 25 million on just recovery efforts, but what she didn't mention was that the suppression costs for the Cameron Peak fire were like $136 million. Where are my figures? So market property loss is estimated to be at 6.3 million, and total structure loss is estimated to be $100 million for just the Cameron Peak fire. Obviously, the cost of fighting fires and managing for fire recovery has gone up over the past 10 years, 15 years. So this is something we're trying to avoid, and there is a way to do that. So right now, this map is from the Colorado State Forest Service Forest Atlas map. It shows our Larimer County's landscape risk to wildfire, and you can see, so that's the part of the Big Thompson that burned, part of the Pooter River that burned. There still is a considerable amount of fire risk across our landscape. Luckily, there are methods that we can implement on the landscape to help reduce that risk. This is another way to look at it. So this is in the Big Thompson watershed and along Waltonia Road. An aerial map showing the forest structure, comparing the 1940 structure to 2017 forest structure. Aside from being black and white, what do you see is the biggest difference? More trees. So over the last 100 years, we have suppressed naturally occurring wildfires in our forested landscape. So that was a natural way to sort of thin the forest out and create, really make the forest more resilient, but prevent these large catastrophic fires. So if a fire were to come through, would hit this open area, maybe slow down a little bit. But because it's so thick, it just blows right through there. And this schematic actually shows that. So on this side, it's showing an untreated forest. And on the right side, it's showing a treated forest. On the left side, we see ladder fuels that are able to take what is normally, historically, naturally a ground fire in a naturally occurring system. And because all the ladder fuels are there, it allows the fire to go up into the canopy. And so it's just burning so hot and so intensely that it's scorching, like truly scorching the soil. Nothing is living there anymore. In some of our areas in our watershed, it looks like the moon.
A treated forest, really, that's the ground cover.
Treating, thinning the forest. So we actually have forest treatments where we have contractors that go out and thin a lot of the smaller trees that are in a certain area that we're trying to thin.
Thin and ideally then
Prescribed
burning.
burning. So we want to also be putting prescribed burning on the landscape eventually. We can't do that yet until we start treating this. So once we get this system, you can actually put prescribed fire down, which mimics history, like it mimics the historic way, the forest ecosystem used to, transition from one stage to the other, but let's see. We are both members of the Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative, working to get healthy wildfire and prescribed burning back on the landscape. So one of the things, $100, $200 million is a lot to fight fire and recover from the fire. It is pretty expensive to treat forests also. So, we're looking at anywhere from 3,500 to sometimes 6,000 an acre. But that's a lot less expensive than recovering from a fire. So, if we can, if we're bringing mechanical equipment out there and using hand saws and everything, or hand thinning treatments, that is expensive. Prescribed burning is the cheapest option that we have to treat the amount of slash that's on the ground. So if we can, or hopefully we will start getting, increasing our ability to get fire on the landscape. We do have a lot of folks investing in mitigation. So I know our coalition has funding from Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart program that helped to kickstart our forestry program. We do get U.S. Forest Service funding for capacity funding. I mean, when I started, we had 2 people working for my organization. We now have 4. You have 4 or 5. It's a lot of work. And, unless we have the capacity funding to fund our positions, there's no one really out there doing this work. We have a couple other partners. Larimer Conservation District works on private lands. Of course, the U.S. Forest Service does work on Forest Service property, but there's a lot of acres out there. We do get funding from local municipalities for capacity funding. Our private landowners invest a lot in managing their own forests. Northern Water does provide capacity funding and implementation funding for the coalition. I did talk to Megan. I'm sure you have lots of other sources, but one thing that I want to close with kind of goes back to what you were talking about, Tatum, is this private business side. So, of course, I think there is an organization called Brew Water. I'm not sure if it still exists. A lot of the breweries in Northern Colorado actually are making investments in protecting their sources of water.
Yeah, I will just make a shout out to the brewers, especially some of the big guys, but like Horse and Dragon has been a major donor to
Yeah.
Sweet Carolina. New Belgium and Odell, like they've really stepped it up and are some of our biggest donors. So I just want to shout out to the
Yeah.
brewers. They really, recognize the connection between forest health and water quality, and it's their most important ingredient.
Yeah. But the question being, you know, there's a lot of other big businesses out there. Should they be investing in this resource that is finite, that we're all going to be fighting? We already are fighting over already. So should there be an investment in protecting our source water?
Especially tech. We're a tech hub. So, and I know they're all using water.
Of course, perspective, you know, with the whole thing of fire, of putting out fires. You had the Great Shango Fire back in 1890 where 3,000 people burned to death in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Then they had the big burn in 1910, when I had a whole bunch of burn. Fire gets found, get it out by 10 o'clock. That started the whole thing with the aerial application. And
What year was that?
but 1910, that was the area.
Were you around there?
But I got people to work. I worked for the Forest Service and Park Service, the 60s, worked for the Glacier National Park on trail crews, got fire spray from the smoke generator for several years, 3 years in the 60s. And the idea was getting that by 10.
Yep.
Of course, and you realize it may sound great to let a fire burn, except fires don't stop at a boundary. It'll burn right through the town and kill people. And so you have this balance between protecting your people, or maybe let's protect the wild, let it burn, let the people burn, but protect the water. You know, you have this balance.
I think the Forest Service has a different philosophy now where
Now they change.
can we control
Yeah.
a wildfire burning rather than putting it out? Let's control where it's moving. Because they do go in and create these fire lines to try to, you know, prevent the fire from going one direction to the other. And now we're actually making plans, putting plans in place to, you know, if a fire were to come through, you know, where are those areas at risk, our hazard areas, our assets that we really need to protect, and putting, and that's helping us strategize where we put our forest thinning and our forest projects on the landscape to make sure that we are better protecting those areas at risk.
And it's also an issue of money because the Congress has said the Forest Service couldn't spend its own money on firefighting. No more money. So they're taking money out of remediation and other projects to put it in to fight the fire because there's no more money.
Well,
So they're
they
being
have time for
burned on both ends.
You guys have each have a slide or two with partners, investment partners, and there's a logo I see missing there. I'm curious why Larimer County, because they have a pretty robust natural resources department. I haven't seen them listed. Have they not participated in the mitigation?
Larimer County is definitely a part of, mitigation. They're a member of the NOCO Fireshed and really active, in mitigation work. As far as funding for post-fire recovery, I don't know.
They did provide funding for post-fire recovery work. They actually are helped to funnel the emergency watershed protection funding that Kimberly was talking about. They were our fiscal agent for that. And they've been helping recover roads and that type of infrastructure. Their emergency services and wildlands module, they do a lot of thinning as well.
Okay.
It's a slow process.
For sure, but they have a robust like natural resources department, you
Yes.
know, noxious weeds and stuff like that.
Yes.
Imagine boots on the ground, helping with the plantings and they've been involved as well.
With reforestation, not as much, that I know of.
More for curiosity.
Yeah, more, from what I know, more on, definitely on post-fire recovery. So, yeah, and I can definitely add their logo back in if they are a funder, but, yeah, mitigation and post-fire recovery, they've been a big.
Yeah, and Lori Hodges, the director of OEM, you know, she is who I think sort of spearheaded all of the original discussions for.
But if you go to that collaborative slide that showed all of the different organizations, they're pretty much in every single rectangle.
Julie, and then I think Jason, and we've got to wrap it up, so you talk for Josh.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and I don't know, how much does, more people living up in these areas, does that factor in any of this kind of thing? I mean,
Which part of it?
well, I mean, human
All
cost,
of
I
it.
guess it's a part of the costs. I mean, your costs are already ridiculously high, but now you have more and more people that are living up in these areas. I guess a way that when, you know, you see these fires happening and people see, my gosh, my place is gone now. Were we meant to live up there? I mean, how do you guys, how does that come into play?
I mean, yeah, when they build a home up there, they have to know that, you know, that is part of the risk, which I think is becoming increasingly more in their minds when they try to get homeowners insurance, because a lot of insurance companies don't actually cover them anymore, and they're dropping out. I will say that, you know, it is like a dream of a lot of people to live out in the mountains. So, you know, someone moving from Midwest, come out here and they find their dream home and they don't know what the risk is. And I think a lot of, at least, you know, some of the communities that we've been working in, we're trying to bring that into like their new homeowners onboarding process to say, here's some pamphlets, you know, you should actually look at managing your forest and creating defensible space around your homes and home hardening and making sure that your house isn't as much at risk to a fire coming through. But yeah, I mean, these communities are definitely an area where we are focusing our work to try to prevent a fire from burning all the homes.
I just related to that, the Cameron Peak fire, I think, was human caused. And yet the Forest Service allows open burns, even though we're getting hotter and drier, and we've all been victimized by these fires in the Northern Front Range. I just wonder if you have an opinion on that, allowing these open fires anymore.
Like in campsites?
Pardon?
In campsites or?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do know that the, Arapahoe Roosevelt, they have hired, I think, 8 or 9, like wildfire, mitigation specialists or prevention specialists. And so that's huge for that particular force. So they'll be going out and doing education, for campers. They're also helping with education around mitigation work that we're doing, but I think that's really helpful, but they are managing just like these huge swaths of land and they just don't have enough resources. So I think a big part of it is public education. Because yeah, like you said, I think it's 80% of wildfires now are caused by humans. So there's obviously a lot we could do from a prevention standpoint. I think a big part of that's gonna be public education.
Great, all right, well, we are going to move on for our last speaker before lunch. We've got Josh, voice of the day. He's a staff attorney for the Colorado Water Trust and joined the organization in August. Previously, he worked as a water lawyer at a small firm for 3 years, where his clients included municipalities, ranchers, farmers, and landowners. He served for the Honorable James F. Hartman in Colorado's Division of Water Corps and served in the Peace Corps in the Republic of Moldova. Good people, Peace Corps. All right, thanks, Josh. And for those who were at the Peter River Forum, you probably saw his holiday speech as well. So
We'll cover a little bit the same thing.
yeah.
Is there a remote? Yes. Very good, right there.
Thank you.
Here's that for you. Okay, let me just keep this pulled up. Perfect, awesome. So again, my name is Josh Boyce,
and I'm the staff attorney to the Colorado Water Trust. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about environmental water in Colorado. And so that's in-stream flow water rights, as well as some of the other stream restoration tools that we use and that can be used around the state. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to the Water Trust, who we are and what we do. Then I'll do a deep dive into in-stream flow rights and how they work in the state's prior appropriation system, talk about the state's in-stream flow program, and then I'll kind of move on to some of the other tools that we and others use to put flow back into the rivers. So the Colorado Water Trust is a nonprofit, and our mission is to restore water to Colorado's rivers. We started a little over 20 years ago when a group of water attorneys and water engineers got together and decided to create an organization to help bolster the state's in-stream flow program. We work very closely with water users and the Colorado Water Conservation Board to put together voluntary transactions to benefit the environment. All of the transactions that we do are uniquely tailored for each water right and for each water system. So we really try and work with the streams on the ground and with the specific water rights and what they bring to the table. And another important thing about us is that we work completely within the prior appropriation system. And we compensate the water rights users that we work with at fair market value for their water. So just diving into in-stream flows here, I will kind of assume that you all are somewhat water experts already. But if there's any kind of water law terms that you don't understand, or if I say something that doesn't make sense, please stop me and I'll take a step back. So in-stream flows are water rights that were created by the state of Colorado in order to protect water in the stream. So most water rights, you think about, a key part of that water right is that they're diverted out of the stream and put to a beneficial use. The state decided that they also wanted a kind of water right that could be protected in the stream against diverters downstream that are junior to that water right. And so they created this program a couple years ago, about 50 years ago. All in-stream flow water rights will typically have a beginning point and an end point. And they'll also come with a flow rate. And sometimes they'll have two flow rates. They'll have a preserved flow rate, which is the lower, and then they'll have an improved rate, which is a higher rate. Important thing to know about them is that the Colorado Water Conservation Board, which is a state agency in the Department of Natural Resources, has the exclusive authority to operate an in-stream flow. And there's two kinds of in-stream flows, and we'll talk about, I'll talk about both of them in a sec, but one is an appropriation and the other is an acquisition. So just a little bit of history here. Recognizing that water use in Colorado started way before 1876, I wanted to start with the state constitution, which gives everybody the right to divert unappropriated water and put it to a beneficial use. A couple of years later, the General Assembly came out with a law that basically came up with a way to assign priorities to different water users and to allocate water to those different priorities. Within a couple of years, I think within 2 years, that new law was put to the test when drought kind of hit the Front Range. And so there were a lot of conflicts on the cache lacuta between different ditch companies because there just wasn't enough water. So the state legislature had to come back and they came up with a way to administer those water rights. They came up with water courts, and they also gave the authority to administer those water rights to state officials. In 1903, the General Assembly came back and they expanded what beneficial use could mean beyond just agriculture and irrigation to all kind of the beneficial uses that we use today, that we see today, except for in-stream flow. The history of Colorado is one of resource extraction, and so water is no different. It's seen as a resource. It needed to be taken out of the river put to some use to make something else, to make some other benefit. And so, until quite recently, leaving water in the stream was considered wasteful, and was considered illegal. It was against the law. But then in the 1970s, a large part, spurred on by the environmental movement at the national level, the state decided to create a program and create these new kinds of water rights in order to leave water in the stream, and that water would be protected against future diversions or against junior diversions. Okay, so this is a map of all of the in-stream flows in the state. You can see that they're mostly here in the mountains. A good reason for that is availability. Up in the high mountain streams, there's not a lot of farmers, so there's still water available to be used. There are for in-stream flow water rights, it's important to remember that there are administrative process that they have to go to. So there has to be agency approval for these water rights. But they're also, because it's a water right, they also have to go to water court and get that water right approved or confirmed. So as I mentioned before, there are two different kinds of in-stream flow water rights. There are appropriations and acquisitions. Appropriations, they are new water rights. So the Colorado Water Conservation Board will go to water court and they'll say, we want a new water right for this particular specific stream reach, and we want it for this amount. This is, because it's a new water right, it's going to be a very junior priority. So it's going to be very low down in the priority system. And these water rights are only allowed to use preserve rates. So we joke that the preserve rates are just enough water in the stream to keep the backs of the fishes wet. And so these water rights are the vast majority of the in-stream flows that you see in the state. There are more than 2,000 of them right now. Whereas acquisitions, there's less than 50. So acquisitions are existing water rights. Usually they're agriculture irrigation water rights. They're very senior. This CWCB goes out and acquires them. Either the water rights owner will donate them or they'll work with us to facilitate a transaction. Then they'll go to water court and they'll go through a change case to add in-stream flow as the beneficial use in addition to the other uses that they've got. You can do an acquisition that's temporary, or you can do an acquisition that's permanent. Most of them are permanent, but we're starting to see a lot more temporary ones. And these acquisitions are able to use preserve and improve rates. And I'll explain a little bit more why the improve rate is really important in a bit. But does anybody want to take a guess why there's the vast difference in number between the two different types?
Funny.
Yeah. Senior agricultural rights are very, very expensive. So it's not cheap to go to water court to make a new water right, but it's infinitely cheaper than buying somebody's ranch and going to water court to change that. Okay, so the CWCB is both a staff and a board. The board is made up of citizens, and there's at least one from every major river basin in the state, including the metro area. So CWCB staff will often collaborate with us and Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Do you have a question?
Yeah, how long do people serve on that? Or what's the length of the term?
That's a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head. Committee. No, it's not long.
I think it's 3 or 4,
Yeah.
but then, they can be reelected.
Yeah. And Colorado Parks and Wildlife is important. They have an important role in these in-stream flow rights because they're the ones that kind of come up with what the rates are. Every water right needs an amount associated with it. And when you have a non-consumptive water right, like an in-stream flow, you could, the sky's the limit with what you could claim you need. But what the state has said is that that Parks and Wildlife, they really base that on what the wildlife itself needs. And so they come up with a science-based amount for both the preserve and improved rates. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how these actually work. But to set the scene, this is just a basic example of a river. Here, 10 CFS that's coming down. We've got two water users on this stream. One is a senior water user with a 1900 priority, and then we've got a junior user with 1950 priority. The senior is diverting 2 CFS and the junior is diverting 4 CFS. So by the time both users are satisfied, you've got a fraction of what was left in the river beforehand. So let's take the same stream and let's say that the CWCB in 1990 went to water court and appropriated a new in-stream flow rate for 4 CFS. So because this 1990 right is so junior, it means that it can't be protected against more senior diverters. So, this is something you've seen with the kind of priority system. But if you're more senior and you're downstream, you can divert junior waters. You can divert against junior water. So you can see that even though the in-stream flow right exists here, because it's junior, it can still be diverted by these two more senior water rights. So what's nice about this is that even though it's not protected against these guys, if you have somebody that comes in next year, files for a new water right, they will have to respect whatever's left in the stream. So these appropriations, they can't put water back in the stream, they can't rewater a stream, but they can preserve the status quo against future development, which is why you see so many of these throughout the state. It's kind of protecting that base level for everyone. Okay, so let's take the same stream system, but up the stakes a little bit. Let's say that these two water users now have the ability to divert the entire amount that's in the stream. And you see this a lot. We call this sweeping the stream, where there's nothing left after that last water rights user. So traditionally you have this situation where you've got a dry stream, but then let's say the CWCB comes in and they acquire a senior water right for 4 CFS, say it was agricultural user. They go to water court and they change that for in-stream flow purposes. So now that water is no longer being diverted to this guy. They can leave it in the stream, and because it's more senior than these two, they can't divert it. So even though they're diverting what normally would have taken the whole stream, now there's at least something left. So these are really, really important for putting back some of the damage that was done, over 100, 150 years of not having an in-stream flow program. Okay, so moving on a little bit from the in-stream flow program to talk about a little bit more about the work that we do as an organization and some of the other tools that we've used that are out there. We've done about 25 projects. I think it's actually a little bit higher now that has added 74,000 acre feet or 29 billion gallons of water to more than 600 stream miles around the state. We work in very, very close partnership with the CWCB. The CWCB has a statutory fund of $1 million to acquire senior water rights, but $1 million does not go very far, if you can believe it. So we are there. We do a little bit of fundraising. We do a lot of fundraising to help facilitate these transactions. We'll do a lot of the initial legwork as well to kind of look at the stream need, look at the water rights, and see if this would be a good fit for the stream. So we work with the CWCB under a multi-year contract. So we're kind of like the nonprofit arm a little bit of the CWCB, at least in terms of these acquisitions. We don't really have anything to do with appropriations because they're new water rights and the CWCB just does those. So when we, how we work is every year we will put a request for water out. We'll basically say, hey, anybody with water rights, if you want to participate in kind of stream flow restoration, let us know. And they'll send us a filled out form that details where they are, their water rights, what water rights they have, and what they might be interested in doing. And so we'll take those applications and we'll do confidential reviews of those water rights to see how strong they are, how they've been used historically. We'll also do an assessment of stream flow benefits and see, like, is the stream actually one that would benefit? Some streams don't need it, so we'll say, sorry, I don't think your stream really needs that help, so we're gonna focus on something else. And once we'll do that, we'll start to look at the different transactions options that are out there.
That's what would be an example of a stream that didn't need it, like the booter doesn't need it.
No, the pooter definitely needs it.
Booter needs it. like dry-
You could have a stream that, for example, the most senior water rate is all the way down at the bottom of the stream reach. And so that water is being left in the stream for most of it anyways. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, sure. So we'll look at the different transaction options that are out there, and there's a lot of them. Each one of these is a different tool, but you can kind of categorize them into 3 separate groups. You've got the permanent one, which is kind of like, you've got the change of use in stream flow. You've got more flexible ones where you've got, let's say, water in a reservoir, and we'll release that water to be released and put to some other beneficial use, and I'll show an example of that. And then we've also got temporary tools as well. So we've got, this one is probably the most popular, the 5 and 10 temporary loan. This is created by the state legislature a couple years ago, and it allows you to enroll somebody's water rights in this program without having to go to water court for a period of 10 years. And you're allowed to use that water for in-stream flow purposes in 5 of those 10 years for a part of the year, not the whole year. And so these temporary ones are really nice because you saw permanent acquisitions can be really, really expensive. So the temporary ones are a great way for us to kind of surgically address the need when and where it is. So, every year is going to be different from a water hydrological perspective, right? So some years there'll be a lot of water in the stream and you just don't need that in-stream flow. It's fine on its own for the year. But there's going to be some years where it's really dry and you do need that. So we have a lot of water rights that are in these temporary loan programs that are ready to go if and when the stream conditions look bad. Here are just some more details of each of these, and I'll make sure to pass on a PDF of this so you all can have this as a resource. And then I put this on here. This will take you, and it's on the last page as well. So if you don't have time to get your phone out, that's okay. But this will take you to a link that has a report that explains all of the tools that are out there, kind of in narrative form, explains how they work, whether we've used them, where we've used them. So it's kind of a useful resource if this is something that's interesting to you. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the projects that we've used, what the projects were, what they look like, and the benefits. So the first one is this is a project on the Little Cimarron River, which is a tributary to the Gunnison River. It comes into the Gunnison just below Blue Mesa Reservoir. This was a permanent acquisition where we partnered with a land trust. The land trust bought this parcel of land. We bought the water rights. We went to water court to change the use of these water rights to include in-stream flow. We granted a right of use to CWCB so that they could use it for in-stream flow when they needed to. But this is what's called a split season irrigation water right. So this means that in most years, it's going to be kind of dependent on the conditions, but in most years, the farmer is going to be able to use that water in the early summer, in the spring and early summer, to grow, say, a crop of alfalfa or a crop of hay. And then in about early July, they'll cut that first run of hay, and instead of doing a second one for the late summer, they're going to let their land be fallow for the rest of the season. We're going to take that water and put it in the stream at a time when it's needed most. The late summer and early fall is a really tough time for streams and rivers in Colorado.
Is the farmer compensated?
Yes, the farmer, well, in this case, we are the water rights owners.
Okay.
So, the land.
Just don't run into water then.
Yeah, but in cases where we're working with another water rights owner, we would be paying them in any year that water is being used for in-stream flow purposes. So we'll fundraise for that, and then we'll give them a long-term lease. So one example of this, is the Coates Brothers ditch, which is, on Tamichi Creek, which is located, between Gunnison and Monarch Pass. This is one of those temporary in-stream flow leases, so in this case, it's a 3 and 10 because that's how the state legislature made it. Now they've updated to a 5 and 10 program, but, in this case, it's a 3 and 10. And so we've done this 1 year so far, but we've got a couple years left in the program. So if we need to use it on Tamichi Creek, we still can. So when we do that, we'll pay the owners of this water right in this ditch company, for that water that they've left in the stream.
Can you pick any time within that 10-year period?
How it normally works is they'll look at, snowpack using the SNOTEL sensors, and starting in kind of maybe about this time of year, we'll look at, how does the state look precipitation wise? Is there a lot of water that's being stored in the snowpack? And if it's looking like it's gonna be a low year, we'll confer with, let's say, the owner of the Coates Brothers ditch and say, and we'll also confer with CWCB and say, do you all think that we should run it this year, or do you want to wait and save it for another year? We'll make a decision by about April or May, and then we'll send out notices to all the interested agencies that need to know that we're gonna run it. And then for that season, that water will be left in the stream, and then we'll pay the water rights owner before the end of the year for that. The last one is a water conservation program, which is essentially it's an agreement to not divert water. So these top two are a little bit more formal. The water conservation program is a little bit more flexible, a little bit easier to get done. But it essentially is an agreement with a water rights owner to just not divert for that year. And then they're protected against abandonment for not using that water that year, and they're also protected what's called their historical consumptive use amount that they could potentially sell to somebody else. If you're not using it, that could be diminished by the state. So there's protections in there for that. We did this project over the last summer in the headwaters of the Fraser River, just over the mountains. And it was a great project. We worked with a ditch company, and we used some of their water that was in a reservoir. We traded that water with Denver Water, and in exchange, Denver Water did not divert some of the water that they would have otherwise in the headwaters of the Fraser. So, and this happened in mid to late September for about 2 weeks. And it really created a nice bridge for the fish as the water started to drop off for the season to get where they needed to go. Another type of tool that we've got is the reservoir release. I mentioned this one a little bit ago, but this is a tool where you essentially release water that's in a reservoir somewhere high up. You send that water downstream to another beneficial use. It doesn't have to be in stream flow use. But the nice thing is that while that water is traveling in the stream, it creates a de facto in stream flow. It's not one that's operated by the CWCB, but it's one that exists nevertheless, and it creates a lot of benefits. So we've got this project on the 15-mile reach, which is a reach of the Colorado River between Palisade and where the Colorado meets the Gunnison River. About 15 miles of the river that's really important habitat for 4 endangered fish species. But river levels at that area can be really low because there's some big diversions just upstream of that. And so what we do, we will lease water from Rudite Reservoir, which is up between Aspen and Carbondale. We'll send that water down the Frying Pan, down the Warren Fork, past Glenwood Springs, all the way down the Colorado River, all the way down to the Grand Valley Power Plant, which is, if you've ever been driving on I-70 and seen these structures. But we'll send that water all the way down, and that water will be used to create power for the town of Palisade. But because power generation is a non-consumptive use of water, all of that water gets put back right into the stream after they're done. So that water gets used rewater that 15-mile stretch. And you can see the amount, some of the amounts of water that we've been able to put in various years have been really high. So we're really happy with these projects. We have another one in Steamboat where we sell that water to the town of Steamboat to be used for water quality purposes. But it also helps keep the stretch of water below Stagecoach Reservoir, which is prime fishing place, from being closed when that water level gets too low. The last project that I wanted to talk about is the Cooter Flows Augmentation Plan project that we're working on with a number of partners. This is a map showing in-stream flows. Most of these are appropriations, but you can see that they're all in the mountains. None of them are on the Front Range itself. None are on the plains. And part of the reason for that is the Cashel Cooter, the Big Thompson. These are very, very hardworking rivers once they come out of the canyons. They get diverted for farm use. That water gets put on the land. It percolates down into the groundwater and comes back into the stream. So it's a cycle of use and reuse with a lot of different users. And so what happens is you've got a stream system, and this is the Cashel Cooter, and this happens at certain points on the river where it just dries up. That the need for the water outmatches the amount of water that the stream actually sends downstream. So we have partnered with a couple Front Range municipalities, including Thornton, Greeley, Fort Collins, along with the CWCB, Northern Water, and some irrigation water users, to come up with a concept called augmentation, an in-stream flow augmentation plan. Have any of you heard of an augmentation plan before? Okay, so it's essentially a way for you to replace out of priority depletions. Usually you see this with wells or something like that. In this case, the depletions are deficits to stream flow. And so we're partnering with these municipalities who have water rights that have been changed to include augmentation use. And so what they do is they'll put water in at the top of where they are allowed to use that water, and they'll leave it in the stream all the way down to the end of their reach. So Fort Collins will put water in here, and then it will be, because it's part of an augmentation plan, it will be protected against all other kinds of diversion. It will be protected against diversions from other people. And then once it goes through this reach, Fort Collins can use that water for its primary intended augmentation purposes, or whatever they plan to use it. So you've got the Greeley reach, you've got the Fort Collins reach, and then you've got the Thornton reach here. Okay, and so that's all the projects that I was going to talk about. I did include one more tool in here. I think some of you come from municipalities, so this is a key one for you, but this is called a recreational in-channel diversion. It's a lot like an in-stream flow water right, but it's used for recreational purposes. And unlike the in-stream flow water rights, which can only be operated by the CWCB, recreation in-channel diversions, or RICIDs, as they're called for short, can be operated by municipalities and districts. And so you'll often see these in towns that have like a rafting feature running through their town. So Slide has got one, Glenwood Springs, Golden, maybe Fort Collins has one. But again, it has to be based on an appropriate amount. This is really important. So when they go to Waterport, they have to show what amount they can use. What's the minimum amount they can use to have a reasonable recreation experience. So that's all that I came prepared to talk about, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Feel free to email me if you want. And then this is the link for that report, that if you point your phone at this, it should pop up with a pop-up. And I can answer questions.
Yeah, so what does the CWCB have to show in Waterport to get a junior in-stream flow water right approved?
Well, so yeah, it's a really good question. First, before they'll even go to Waterport, the board itself has to approve it. So staff will come to the board with a recommendation that a new in-stream flow, that they appropriate a new in-stream flow on this reach. So one of the things that they have to show is the need on the stream. There has to be some need. There has to be some availability as well. It's a water right. So in order to get around the anti-speculation doctrine, you have to show that you can and will use this water right. If there's just no water rights, it wouldn't make sense to have an in-stream flow. The board will discuss that over a period of meetings, public meetings, and they'll get feedback from other water users that might have concerns with an in-stream flow on that particular reach. And then if they approve it, staff will then go to the water board. And they'll have to show the exact same standards of burdens of proof that any other water right user would, in terms of that they can and will use this, that they're not being speculative.
What would it use, I mean, the use is just that fish don't die, or I mean,
Yeah.
the use, I mean, that is to the protection of the river itself?
So yeah, that's a really good question as well. It is based on wildlife, so fish, what the fish need. And that's where Parks and Wildlife comes in. They will do a kind of study on what fish population is there. What does the hydrograph of the stream look like throughout the year? Where are the kind of critical periods? How much water is going to be needed for that minimum, that preserve rate? How much water do you need to keep the backs of those fish wet, essentially?
Yeah.
I mean, there are other ways that you could justify it, like the riparian area and the benefits to that as well. But for the most part, it's really based on kind of fish.
Yeah, so question, one of the selling points that Northern Water has with NIST is the potential to improve the consistency of flows in the river.
Yes.
Is that's true? I mean, that's one of the things they're working on.
And Northern is a partner on the Cooter Flows project with us, so they're kind of doing this at the same time. They're trying to get NIST. I think we'll get our project way before NIST ever comes online. It's way out there. But Northern is a big partner because, you know, the Cooter is a very, like I said, it's a very hardworking river. Everybody's watching. So anytime anybody's doing something, it's really important that there's buy-in and there's multiple partners. So yeah, this is gonna be another thing like this that will add quite a bit of water to the Cooter.
One more question? Any more questions? All right, well, thank you. All right, let's grab our lunches and come back and try to get started.
If you want to grab us down here.
10 minutes of our.
Okay. Of course, yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, totally.
Good to see you, John.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you.
I have to, you think, okay, getting more complicated.
Thank you.
We can put them in a pile. Put your signed NUSA forms in a
Yes,
pile.
bring them up over to me if you have that. I was gonna talk about it at the end, but I guess I probably could have talked about it at the beginning.
Email them on it too.
Yes, yeah, and it will also, I'll bring them also the next meeting too, just to make sure we get everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Got your giant compliment. There. They use flat tops.
Yeah.
Or is this file?
You can just pass it right over to me. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Last session.
The very last one, the topic is wrapping up, so it's not a specific topic. It's really just to wrap up or you said when?
Yeah.
When, it is the day before our field trip, so it's the 8th of May. So the 9th of May is the field trip, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, try to come up with it. It's in the season. It seems like. It's like, she's got to go out. Oh, it's not-
You must have.
Everybody.
Yeah. The Grinch watching. It was last for another.
But that's not.
He's very well managed and kept him. He was our executive director, our financial director, and the like. They don't want something that they're learning yet. Yeah. I forgot that. Don't learn this. I want more, you might.
Yeah, no, I
That's a different conversation.
Wow,
And we're doing a full rework.
is that like what I need or?
The reorg is in reaction to people. See this? Of course. Under, I think it's 7, I think they're every decade. So they're like, something's not working here.
Yeah.
That new system. Yes.
I'm really tired.
You've been editing your living?
Overnight, folks sitting up there, and they're like, oh, that's like, oh.